do that. I just wanted to check with you.
I will move with the I will move with the decision of my people.
Hey, real quick, Bill, 1 or 2 down, Bill.
Or 2 dB there. Thank you. Thank you.
So I just noticed there's a very famous name, probably not even them, but just a very famous name in the participants. I just thought that was interesting.
Wouldn't be a first. There's a lot
While
of
we're
them.
Mitchell's is in.
Okay, hold on.
I've been here.
While we're digressing, James Babbitt, Mandalorian
Okay.
is not spelt the way the car is.
All right. Hi, everybody. If you're watching, if you're watching on YouTube and you're wondering how to get into the conversation, you have to click the link to get to Zoom, and then you have to click the link to get to Mukana. That's where you ask questions and chat on things. But don't put any chat in the YouTube. You can watch there, but you can't actually comment. If you are here and you see this incredible group of people here that are ready to answer questions, centuries of experience here at your bidding, and you want to be part of that, if you want to share some of the knowledge that you have, just get here early. You got to be here by 6:40 Pacific Standard, 7 days a week. And once we do the mic checks, that's pretty much as big as the panel is going to get for the day, except for today, which is if you're an educator, we let you come in. We will try to open up the gates at 7:50, between 7:50 and 7:55, and let the educators start coming in. We'll do another set of mic checks for them. We do that every Saturday for the Focus on Education. If the first hour is always general discussion, just questions that you have about media production, virtual production, media in general. So that's the first hour. Second hour is usually some kind of vertical. So the second hour today is on education, virtual education, and K through 12, e-learning, etc. Tomorrow will still be general discussion, and then we'll get back into more verticals next week. And I think we've stacked up a bunch of questions, so it's a pretty busy morning here. So let's just go ahead and jump into them. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, as promised, everybody said we were going to hold questions about the tech behind the Mandalorian until today. Today is that day, so we start with a question from James Babbitt of San Diego. Mandalorian, hi Alex. Please comment on making the lightsaber fight scenes, choreography, editing, and so forth, such as Luke fighting the Dark Troopers in the final episode.
So, I don't know how they do it today. So I know how we did lightsabers, 25 years ago for episode 1. So that's most of my experience with it. But, generally those, and they've done it a variety of different ways. Sometimes they use short sabers, which are about 1 foot to 1.5 foot long coming out. And then other ones, they use long sabers. And usually these are not, in the past, they weren't lit. They were, but I think that they have recently moved to lit ones to get interactive light. So that they actually have a lighting element up them, so that you going up the stream, so that you actually get the correct interactive pieces. When we did it, we didn't have any of that stuff. So that's kind of how they're doing it, and then it's added on. So typically they're adding to that in post. Go ahead, Stuart.
Those of you who wish to check out the Disney Gallery makings of and behind the scenes, the first episode of season 2's version of that is now available, and there is a fair amount of showing the choreography, especially the sabers and what have you, and the development that went into getting the right look of the sabers, especially for Ahsoka. And how they had to move to external battery packs that are hidden in the costume and what have you. It's a pretty damn good piece of video to watch, and it's actually longer than one of the episodes, so it was very in-depth.
I've always felt like they could do a lot more with behind the scenes. I'm hoping that this one was better than the first season's behind the scenes, which I thought were very superficial. There's a lot of opportunity to shoot a lot. I thought that the ILM coverage of the Mandalorian, of the camera control rigs, was better than almost everything Disney did, in Disney Plus, the 17 minutes or whatever that they did about John Knoll and John Knoll's rig, I think was more interesting than most of the rest of it. So I'm hoping that they do more in that realm. Anyway, so I think that that's how they're kind of approaching it. Again, there's usually a lot of posts to kind of sweeten that, and we'll watch it again and and take a look at it. What is amazing is, in general, people have to remember how much post is being done, or how much planning is being done. Like, all of this stuff is incredibly choreographed, sometimes for weeks, where a lot of this stuff is, being practiced and practiced and practiced. And I don't know, in this one, a lot of times they're shooting at a slower frame rate to make it look a little faster. And the key there is to, open up the shutter so that you get the proper motion blur. So you can only do it, you can reduce it a little bit, but you have to, if you don't do that, then everything looks like it's been rushed, and so, but you can get a pretty good setup. You can slow it down as long as you have the proper shutter, so that it doesn't look like it's, or you speed it up as long as you have the proper shutter, so you still have the proper motion blur. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, obviously, in these kind of things, they have unlimited amounts of money to bring in experts. And it was interesting because when my son was looking for a sport that he was interested in, he decided on fencing. And so I went with him in the early days. And it was interesting to me to see when you're working with something light, like an épée, it is incredibly small, the movements that you make to deflect a blade. Sabers are a whole different thing. So it was fascinating for me to look at the idea of a lightsaber, a thing that is relatively broad but relatively light. And I wonder how they instructed the fencing professionals and the saber professionals to be able to match those two things together. And I've always found it really fascinating to watch the battles from that point of view. A big light thing is a whole different piece.
I mean, one of the things that makes that one a little easier is a lot of wide shots, and there was kind of obviously a reveal. Of course, we have promised that we're going to go ahead and spoil things. So the fact that that it was Luke Skywalker that is going through the that process, they hid that, so that means it's just a stunt double, which makes it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to have a martial arts trained stunt double do all the work than have an actor try to come up to speed. So that made it a lot easier to do. I will say that someone asked me online that, and I chose not to answer it at the time, but anyway, we'll get into the rest of the questions and we can discuss whatever comes up. Anyway, but that does make it a lot easier for those pieces to work. But the logistics of doing those is takes a lot. There was one actor, which I won't get into who, that they had to tell him to stop making lightsaber sounds when he was swinging. In episode 1, he'd go, and he'd be doing that, and they were like, you can't make noises, and so it was a problem for a little while. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
What is the sound of a lightsaber in space? Chris Comfort has our next question. What are your thoughts on the CG of the Jedi in the season finale of The Mandalorian?
Go ahead, John.
I'm just going to comment on Luke. I thought it was incredibly poorly done. Good for a TV show, but I expected better.
I will say that it's amazingly done, but if you don't hit it perfectly, it immediately comes up. And I think that deep fakes are doing a better job of this than animation. I think that's the issue, is that the deep fake would have been a better solution in this sense, especially because you still have access to the actor. Having the actor mapped onto a model of his own face that's younger or different, being able to map that actor back on would have looked, I think, better. TJ, and then Jeffrey, and then Chris, and then Stuart.
So I did a lot of looking at that, and then went back to Return of the Jedi, and then back to The Mandalorian, and I took pictures of the screen and compared how his face looked, and it's subtly different, but different enough that it just didn't seem real to me. And I looked, and at first I thought, was it the eyes didn't move? No, the eyes moved. Was it the face didn't move? No, the face moved. But the overall package just didn't quite come together. We're close.
So good at it. Well, the problem is that as human beings, we're so good at it that a move of less than a millimeter, on our eyes means something different to a human being, and that's the thing. That's the challenge when you start getting into facial animation. Jeffrey.
Yeah, there was the deep fake, and I got it queued up right here. Between what they did for deep fake and what the original was, it's about a minute 36 seconds. So give it a check.
Watch a little of it. If you play a little.
Okay, we can definitely do that. So they're just basically going through the scene, and every time that Luke shows up, they double it up with their deep fake. I don't know if sound's coming through or not.
It's not, but it's fine. The sound will just be distracting.
Sound will get us yanked off of YouTube faster also.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the deepfake looks better.
Yeah. You can see in the eyes the glare of the light and everything.
I'm always amazed that light isn't sorted, like bright eye, glassy eye is like one of the most easy things to do. Yeah. Anyway, but go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I pulled up the same thing, but even just watching it the first time, I knew immediately when he walked in the room and revealed, and his shadow side of his face, camera left, was too bright, and I knew immediately. It looked like a flat projection. And then, of course, the head floats around a little bit. It's not even attached to the body fully. And the keyframing of the mouth, he couldn't even say the F for the force. If I watched it a couple times afterwards, and it's completely keyframed, completely unnatural, and didn't even articulate all the words. So
I feel like the deepfake technology has passed, facial animation by such a large margin.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of curious that anybody's doing it anymore. Like for actual integration into live action. Stuart?
Okay, I'll preface this by saying I love the story and the show and what have you, so I'm saying this as a fan. That was worse than Lawnmower Man 2. It's shocking. The worst thing about it, though, is when you look at the timeline of where the story's set, it is after Jedi. We could have just been seeing Mark Hamill clean-shaved with good makeup and not had all of this.
But again, I think that they could have
done a really bad job.
I felt like they could have done a deep fake of Mark Hamill.
Yeah, that deep fake is fabulous.
But they could have done a deep fake of Mark Hamill with Mark Hamill. And so the mapping would have been a really, very. That's the part that I didn't quite understand is why, if you have the actor, I get he may look too old for where they're going, but I felt like you could have done a deep fake with the actual actor and everything would have fit together really, really well.
He's not too old though, Alex. He's not too old. When you look at the timeline that they've laid out for the character, it's after Jedi, but before the next movie in the line. So it fits.
Actor's 40 years older.
Shave the man.
The actor's 40 years old. I've seen pictures of him. I've seen him. I don't think he would have pulled it off. Like it would have been too much. Go ahead, John, and then Chris.
For me, I think because I'm not got the eye that you guys do.
You muted.
You're muted.
Somehow or another, it muted itself. I don't know how. The clarity levels have been way off, and it was like a very soft focus on Luke, whereas the rest of the movie was very sharp, and that's what told me it wasn't right.
Go ahead, Chris.
And Mandalorian's only 9 years after Jedi, not 40.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, they said in an article, believe it or not, I don't know, that Mark Hamill was part of the process, but I went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what it was, why they didn't use him as a character. And the only thing I can think of is that his body shape has changed so much they didn't want to insult him by refitting his body. I saw the actor that they put up on IMDb of the person who stood in as not the stunt double, but the body double during the dialogue scenes. And he's a little guy and he's young and slender. And I don't know if they just couldn't reshape the body
again,
or.
I just think that I would have loved to see a deep fake with Mark Hamill against Mark Hamill. Because we see deep fakes that look great when you're mapping the wrong person on, and if you had, I do think to Stuart's point, you could have used Mark's, you have his voice, you have him talking, and you're just mapping it onto another person. I think would have worked. But I think that I don't know if we're going to get to a point where hand animated or even motion captured faces are ever going to catch up to deep fake at this point. It's too much detail. I just don't think it'll work. Any next question?
And to Chris Comfort's point, is there really that much difference between trust in the Force and trust in the horse? Anyway, Stuart Fairweather asks next, since Chris C. and TJ have already asked my questions about Luke's face rotoscoping, I'll ask, was anyone else expecting Ahsoka's Lekku to be more flexible? It looked very stiff and creased as Rosario's shoulders. Much praise to Ms. Dawson for getting the small physical characterizations on point.
Go ahead, TJ.
If you're talking about the quote hair things that come over her shoulder, yes, I was surprised that it looked very much like a prop.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, it didn't move right. The Lekku just was stiff.
We don't know what it would be like. That's the problem, is we haven't ever seen it in real life. So it's hard for us to, I mean, it could be, that just could be the way it is.
But we've seen it moving we've seen it moving and being fluid in the way it was animated by the same writer-director.
Right.
So it should have been soft and fluid.
Go ahead. Yes, John.
Yeah, since it was a practical effect and not animated, I was very satisfied with it. I didn't expect it to be any different than it was, especially with all the leaping and such. Now, if they had gone in for some animation, it would have blown the budget. So I can completely understand why they went the practical route that they did, and it was fine for me.
That's good. The next question.
We have a late-in one in from James Babbitt. Hi, Alex. Any interest in scheduling a second hour focusing on the Mandalorian only?
I think we could probably figure that out. Talk through certain scenes. We'd have to kind of as a group figure out what scenes we want to talk about in general. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm imagining that, like a lot of industries, there's an old boys club for ILM. So could we get guests because we happen to know somebody who used to work at ILM?
Thought has crossed my mind. So let's figure out if we can schedule the second hour, and then we'll see what we can do with some surprise guests. I don't know for sure. It's always hard to tell with people's schedule, but there's a couple of us that might be able to jump on. Next question.
Tony Mobley, we're in general questions now, is in with, I have a Pyle and a Polson mic that are both working fine. Suggestions for backup mics or better mics working forward? He's looking for something in the under $200 price range with a Mac Mini and an ATEM Mini Pro, and he wants to know if he needs a mixer.
I don't think you need a mixer until you have something to mix. Like it's not, I haven't seen a lot of mics, to be honest with you, and this is the reason we talk about the Polson and the Pyle, is that I haven't seen maybe any mics between that pair of mics as far as a headset mic and the, going all the way to like a Countryman. Like everything in between is like, it's a little bit better, especially over Zoom with any kind of noise reduction. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, in general, if you're in the world of the inexpensive Pyles and Polsons, which are often terminated in an unbalanced mini pin 3.5 millimeter connector, if and when you decide ever to graduate into the world of XLR balanced microphones, a whole universe of options pop out to you, including inexpensive mics, like we've talked about the SM57 and 58s and things like that are in your price range. But it's a different ecosystem. So you really, when you want to jump up and get into mics that work better in electrically noisy areas, you just have to make the leap. And once you do, you'll kind of never come back to the old unbalanced small connector world.
Yeah, it is, but I think that your investment generally will be with a digitizer, with all the other bits and pieces. You'll end up with spending more than $200. That's the only issue. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Shure. In terms of options for microphones, Shure has a bunch of microphones in the $200-300 US dollar range. In terms of headset mics, I'm not very familiar with the models, but they're pretty popular. As how Shure is popular in the live event scene. It looks like Alex has stepped away.
Oh, he stepped away. All right.
He stepped away, probably went to get something.
So did anybody have any other notes on the Pyle backup mics and the rest of that? Or are we moving on? Looks like we're moving on. Okay. Hasmuk's up next in his question. He's talking about Mukana and Safari. Oh, here we go. Alex is back. Well, let's give him a moment to settle in and put his headphones on and see if he went out to get something to talk about the last question. Alex, while you were off, if you're back on, I didn't know if you went to get something relative to that last question, because we were just about to move on because nobody else had any input. Oh, looks like his now the headset.
I was just going to try something real quick. I just want to see. I had tried this other thing the other day, and it didn't work because I realized it doesn't support 48 volts. But what I wanted to do, let's see here. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Just barely. Hold on.
Yeah, you were low the first time.
Hold on. Let me. Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
A little better.
A little better. So this is now. This is good. This is good for us to kind of figure out because this is the first time I've tested it. So this is the PR40, which is a little bit more than that, but with the very inexpensive XLR to USB. This is the, I don't know, Hoson something or other. Go ahead. I'm just reading it off. It's Hosonjin. There. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm using the PR40 through my ATEM Mini, and I'm having to run it through Audio Hijack at about 4x to get the volume out that you're hearing now.
Yeah, so I probably have to do something there. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would imagine maybe the chipset within that actual cable, or it might even be in the XLR connector because there might be more space there, would be something similar to what, say, you would find in the Tech Rise. Like a simple chipset, not much in terms of an op amp that could boost the gain much, but just enough to get a signal into a digital converter.
Yeah, so it might be something worth playing with just to see. My curiosity, I'll play with it while we're kind of working. You'll see if we can get to it either today or tomorrow. That with Audio Hijack, to John's point, could I get it to a point where this sounded reasonably good through that cable? If it does, then theoretically you would have something that was not too far from $200 that might sound really good. But I don't know. Again, this requires some thought because this is when we talk about hop axis rejection. I'm right up against it talking. And if I talk like this and go up, it really changes quickly. So that's so you really have to eat the mic to get to a point where it's usable. Go ahead, Mickey.
Curious, they have original sound on at the moment? It seems a little band limited right now.
There we go. I just turned it on. I don't know if it's any better or worse, but it looks lower now on my.
Yeah, it did go a lot lower. Though I didn't hear a huge. I'm hearing a little bit of noise floor, but not massive. Not like,
Anyway, it's just something to.
Yeah.
I'll keep playing with it. It's more of a. I have a couple SM58s, and I just don't know where they are at the moment, so I grabbed onto this one. But I think that to Tony's point is one thing to experiment with is this cable with an SM58 as a sub $100, sounds better than even one of the headset mics is just another option. So I have all the pieces to test that. I just have to test it. But it probably would include something on the other end like Audio Hijack to clean it up. So you're still spending more money on software to get to that point. Right.
I will just note that if you go into the SM58 kind of world, if you're an educator or something, those are indestructible virtually. So unlike the piles,
I think you can pretty much
polsons,
nail something into the wall and then pull it out and use it as a mic.
If you have kids around who are going to knock it off your desk, those will last a lot longer.
The little studio mic is the same, the SB7 or whatever, same capsule as the SM58, just a different housing. Anyway, next question.
SM7B.
SM7B. I'm sorry. Yes, SM7B is the same thing as an SM58 in the capsule. It's just the housing that changes. Anyway, next.
Okay, so we're moving on to Hazma Gajar, who's in Cape Town and on the panel, I believe, today. Is Hazma here? Anyway, never had an issue. Now Mukana without the YouTube feed and Mukana full with the YouTube feed both struggle to connect as I get a circle of death connecting to server endless loop. This is on 3 separate machines. Now I'm forced to use Chrome. Mukana connects the first time. Can we help him?
Well, that's, what I would do is any issue with Mukana, my recommendation would be to go into the Mukana section inside of Discord and outline exactly what the issue is. I know that Chris, that's where he watches. I mean, sometimes he's watching here. He might be in here right now, but I know that he watches the Discord link for any kind of bug report or something. You'll find that he's pretty responsive if you put it into the Mukana section inside of Discord. Go ahead, John.
I just want to let you know, Hasmuk, I'm not having those issues, and I'm using Safari exclusively. I've got 2 or 3 different Mukana panels open right now, and one's the YouTube version, and I don't have any issues. So it might be. I'm on Big Sur though, so it has all kinds of other issues.
Yeah, I've always used Safari. I very seldom use Chrome, but now I'm forced to use Chrome. And Chrome, it fires up Mukana instantly every time. I have cleared the cache and reinstalled the stuff. I'm still having the same problem, but I'll plug it into Discord, the issues I'm having.
Yeah, go ahead and plug it in. I will admit that the vast majority of us that are testing Mukana, most of us are using Chrome for it. I don't think Safari is. I know Chrome is my primary browser. I use Safari a little bit, but I don't use it a lot. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Peter.
Hasmuk, was there a change in operating system or anything between when it was stable and when the faults started to occur?
Well, Catalina had the security and other updates about 2 weeks ago. That may be a possibility. So this is going on for about 2 weeks. Yeah.
That could be it. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, I had that happen to me about a week ago, and it randomly started. It did it for about 4 days, and then it stopped, and then everything went back being fine. And to the question from Stuart, I changed nothing.
Right. Next question.
Paul Wallace from here in the panel says, what websites do you use to get ratings and reviews for tech products these days?
I go ahead, John.
Sorry, tech stuff is a hobby of mine. I think that's true for most of us here, but I use Google and read a variety of sites. If I'm going to go to one site, it's probably the Wirecutter. But I've found it more hit or miss for my preferences. I have slightly different tastes than they do. But usually what I do is I go to Google, search, pick the first 3 to 4 sites, read through those reviews, and then make my own judgment call. I don't go with any one particular thing.
Anyone else have some sites that they prefer as far as websites that have? I admit that I think I rely on what we learn on this group more than anything else. There's a bunch of people talking about it all the time, so I think that it usually comes up in conversation here before I do anything else at this point. Go ahead, Bill.
I do kind of check informally with Guy because he's so involved in equipment and everything tech, and he pays so much attention to it and works so hard to keeping current with what the manufacturers are putting out that I truly respect his opinion as much as anybody right now.
We're very fortunate to have Guy on the panel. There's times when we throw the ball over there and he grabs it and runs down the field. It's like there's an answer. so anyway, and we have that with everybody here. There's that's what's great about this panel is that different with different issues, someone will go deep really quickly with an answer because it's something they know well. So it's part of what makes this work. Go ahead, Brian. Were you gonna say something? No? Yes. I caught you off guard. Chris.
As far as YouTube channels go, I like Gerald Undone. He's funny, but I think he also does some smart stuff. And Curtis Judd does a lot of audio and some lighting also, but mostly audio stuff. And again, I feel like, yes, they're 2 YouTube people, so take it as it is. But I think they both do a better job than most of doing intelligent testing on things.
I will admit that I'm the first step is getting my system back up, and then the next step is for me to build a little lab, and then my goal is to try to figure out ways to kind of take some of the stuff that we're learning here and then turn them into videos, that we put onto the site, where we interact or we have kind of a live thing, and then that gets condensed down to something and to show it, to try to crystallize some of the stuff that we're figuring out as a group. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for me, sound equipment, my go-tos are JW Sound, Gear Sluts, and Production Experts. And I really like these sites because the people writing there are actually engineers. They use the gear on a day-to-day basis, so it's really nice to get firsthand experience from them, as opposed to like from a publication that is mainly like just reviewing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Moving on to Leo Mindell in London. John, how are you using Audio Hijack in your path and why?
I'm assuming that's for John Pruitt.
It was posted around the time that we were talking about my chain this morning, so I'm guessing that was the case.
Mhm.
So I was trying to accomplish several goals. Some may be good, some may not be good. Number one, I mainly use Zoom at work, so I needed something to hear myself and check my own levels. So Audio Hijack gives me the ability to feed my mix back to myself. The other thing is I'm in a very noisy room, and so I use it for noise reduction, except for today, because we've been having some problems with clicking today. The other thing is I use it to check my levels, and I bought at Mickey's recommendation Wave, so that I can use the voice meters to check my levels when I'm not in the room. And then that's mainly what I use it for. But like I said, sometimes it's well-intentioned, sometimes it's not knowledgeable. I am the non-audio guy on this panel.
Whoops. Is it Alex, you're muted, or why am I not hearing anybody?
I was drinking tea. Sorry.
Oh, that's
Next question.
Next question. Actually, I moved up because I didn't realize that Hasmuk's second question was separated by some things, and this is kind of a follow-on to his earlier one. New addition to my lexicon. Explain RGB parade. I know something to do with red, green, and blue. Then there is a waveform in the vectorscope. Are these linked to any specific application and hardware? My Google talks about Adobe Premiere has RGB parade video scope.
So here is the RGB. You can see that Mickey has spotlit the. This is the scope box that Guy has put through, and so what you're looking at here is the vector scope. Again, you'll see a little line here, and that's mostly giving you kind of skin tone. And the rest of this vector scope makes more sense when you have a chip chart that's designed for it. But what does make is probably more useful here is the waveform here, and then the RGB parade. Now the waveform is basically the level of pixels, the RGB summed together across the across the frame. So what you're seeing here, as you look at this, is where all those pixels are lying in the 0 to 255 or 0 to 100 range, and so. Here we can see, for instance, that you probably have some, you do look a little contrasty for us, and we can see that in the scopes because we can see that some of these values are actually coming in under 0. So things are kind of being clipped to black there. And then there's some bright highlights here. And if we look at it, it's probably a highlight on a frame somewhere here. And so you get used to it. And right now, Hasmuk's not moving. I don't know if it's frozen. No, something's frozen. So it's sometimes a little easier to see when it's moving, but for some reason it's not moving very much right now. Anyway, but what you're looking at is the value of the pixels scanned across the frame. Now the waveform is the RGB summed together, so it's the culmination of those, the average actually of those together. And then what you see specifically in the RGB parade is the value of the pixels in red, green, and blue. So the red values, the green values, the blue values. In each one of these. And so that makes it easier to see, if you have even lighting, especially if you have something that's white or gray in the background, you can kind of start to see where those things, should fit. The histogram is just population of the pixels between one and the other. So that's a different, it's the number of pixels in the whole frame between, 0 and 255. But these are per line, where those, where those pixels are, so that you get a real sense of what the coloration is, across here. So the waveform is useful to some degree, but what the most valuable one is the RGB parade, because it shows me my balance between the different colors. When I'm doing a green screen, I'm looking for a green that is at least 30 to 40 points above the red and the blue. And if you're looking at a waveform, for instance, you're also looking at a green screen. you'll want to look at a straight line going all the way across. And so you'll see that straight line. And if it's thin and it's straight across, you're going to get a great green screen, because it means that all the pixels that you have to deal with are in a very small area, which means you're not throwing very much away. So those are some of the things that make this process more efficient. But yeah, these scopes are useful. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Anyone else? Next question.
John Pruitt of Huntersville and the panel, of course, is in with more of a philosophical question. But when setting up a YouTube channel, should you be optimistic and launch Patreon along with it?
Go ahead, Stuart.
It's not a matter of being optimistic or even whether it's just Patreon. If you're starting a new channel with new branding, you should be going through and registering that branding for all social media platforms so that nobody else can grab it and abuse it while you're trying to build your brand.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I agree with Stuart. The bigger thing is that Patreon is its own ecosystem. And if you're not willing to put in the time for that ecosystem, it's going to do nothing. I have a Patreon channel and I have it sitting there. You can click on it to go there, but I haven't touched it in over a year. So if you're not willing to put the time into it, it might not be worth it.
Next question.
TJ Asher is from the panel and in with, I have heard a lot about the Facebook portal for Zoom quality upgrades. How well does it really work for Zoom? Usage would be for an 84-year-old with failing memory. I want to be able to check up on them periodically. And is there a way to leave it in auto answer?
I know that Echo does that. I'm not sure if the portal does that. Go ahead, Bill, and then Guy.
I don't know right now, but for a similar thing, I think I mentioned a month or so back that my brother-in-law had a heart attack and he's doing well and he's come back fabulously, but it's the same kind of thing. Somebody stayed with him for the first 2 weeks of his convalescence, but right after that, based on talking about it here, I bought the large portals, one for my wife to have here and one for him to have in his home, so that she could kind of touch base, and we're about to set it up. He was given it yesterday, and so I'll report back as it comes. But it wasn't so much to do the upgrade in quality, but that direct kind of connection thing, which I feel like is built into that, will be a boon to keeping in touch with somebody he's pretty technically literate, but not really technically literate. So it seemed like a good way to just make it simple.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm a little bit confused. Do you want to use the portal to upgrade the quality, or do you want to use the portal for him to come on? Because if he's using the portal,
it's not for quality at all. It's only to be able to communicate face to face. I don't care about the quality. It's I need to be able to communicate with this person so that we can, hi, how are you doing? Physically see them, see how they're doing physically.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's anything auto on it for that.
Guy may be able to help here. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on which one you have, I don't think that I'd really want to use this one for conversation unless I could find a way to prop it up with some books, or because it doesn't have a quarter 20 or anything. The larger one is really the way to go. In fact, I'll get more feedback here because I just gave one to my mother, and unfortunately won't be there until 12:30. But then I'll get more feedback because she uses Messenger with her family, and I guess they make rooms, and they're able to communicate with like 10 people all at the same time, and they love Messenger. So I thought, what a great gift. And I also gave one to a preschool teacher who will start using it here pretty soon, but it doesn't have auto answer. They actually have, so on a Zoom room, like I have one downstairs, and in our conference room at the office, you can tell it to auto answer in the back end, meaning if you call it, if you invite it, it will automatically turn on, which for privacy reasons, I'm sure some people don't want that. I know on the Amazon Echo, which I also have at the office, it'll blur out. So it'll let you know, I don't know how many of you guys have that, but it'll ring and then it'll let you know, like it'll give you time, like if you're not appropriated, you can get ready or cover the camera or whatever. So the larger one is really the best one though for communication, just because it's at eye level, it has a bigger speaker, it has a better camera. So I really recommend the larger one, even though it's way more expensive. So $229 versus I think this one's $129. But I mean, for a communication device, again, with the big speaker on the back, the microphone, the smaller camera, it's great for up-resing meetings, but I'd recommend the bigger one.
Go ahead, TJ.
Do you think the portal is better than the Echo as far as a communication device with somebody who, you know, may or may not be able to get up and answer?
If they can't get up, I would get the Echo, because you can do a drop. It's called a drop in, and with drop in, again, it'll ring. And there's a new one coming out, a new one that actually physically turns. So when you watch a commercial on the Facebook Portal Plus, it looks like it moves. It doesn't physically move at all. It's just a 4K sensor, and it's moving around in that sensor. There's a new one that's coming out. I think it's an 8-inch very soon, and it physically will turn. So I'm excited to get one of those. If you can hold off, I would try to hold off for that one, because if they're moving around the room, that would be way better, I mean, in the future, and especially with the drop-in communication.
Is that a new Alexa or a new Facebook?
New Alexa, new Echo.
New Alexa, you
And-
need to sign up to get on the advanced warning on it, or advanced notice of it. And it also will have Zoom on it, but I don't know what flavor.
And then there's the, you know, the ease of use and expense versus feature set. So what we send out to folks is a little, you know, that might be applicable, just to say, is that we have a Mac Mini, you know, that we can control. It's on a VPN, and we can log into it and run whatever we want. You know, we can run whatever service we want on it. You know, we can put a Brio, you know, onto it where we can pan and scan inside of Zoom, because we're controlling both ends. You know, so you know, I'm just saying that if you really are geeky and you want to, and you're not cost prohibited to go after something, you could probably build a really great way to talk to somebody, you know, remotely, that might cost more money and take a little bit more work to set up, but you'll end up with a much higher quality experience all the time if you do that. So just something else to kind of consider. These ones are all great for ease of use. I think that I was pretty close. If I hadn't been traveling so much, I was designing one again for my grandmother. We were talking about it before the show. And probably given another 6 months, would have had a pretty robust system in her room. So but that's kind of so it's another approach, you know, that you can kind of consider. Anyway, next question.
Somebody named Alex L. out of Novato, California asks, I want to take a film, automatically slice the film shot by shot into clips, and then export a single frame from each clip. Any ideas on the best way to do this?
Like Alex L. I don't know if we should really answer that question, because he's kind of crazy,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
and he's got
but
all
if we
these
don't,
crazy
he'll get
ideas. And,
upset.
yeah, he'll complain, and we'll start trolling people. Go ahead, Bill.
I have the back end of this. I know there are a couple of little utilities that will do that kind of auto cut thing that I think Premiere does. It finds a big change in the scenes and make a cut. I've never used that. I don't know it. But for the single frame export, I've done automator scripts that do in Final Cut a down arrow, which takes you to the next cut, C for select the clip, export a still, and then do down arrow to get to the next clip, loop. And I've had success with having a whole bunch of cuts single framed out that way.
Good, Stuart.
So what you're really asking is how to generate a thumbnail from a video file, because the way the question is framed, the answer is actually that.
Yeah, I mean, but the goal is that, so a lot of us we've built I've built them by hand, and I just realized I really want to do it more automated, where what we would do is to analyze a film or to analyze somebody's work, TV show, film, so on and so forth. We'd throw it in and we'd cut it into things, and it would take an hour or two to get what I wanted. And I was like, there's got to be a tool that will just go do this. And I know that like Resolve will automatically cut by scene or cut by clip. So you can have it just automatically go through it. What I don't know is if I can grab a frame from each one. What's mesmerizing is watching, if you take a whole film and just put every image up of every clip, you get to see what they were thinking while they did it, because they think that way. Like if you look at the Matrix, it's green and warm, green, warm, green, warm, green, warm. And you see patterns that they're doing that you don't notice when you're watching the film. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and in terms of that style, like in terms of cutting, Walter Murch does that. He prints out every single frame, and that's how he cuts. He looks around the room and selects. But and how to do this? Yeah, in Resolve, I was actually just playing around with it. There's scene cut detect that you mentioned. Of course, it gets confused sometimes with dissolves, and you know, if you do star wipes and fancy transitions.
Right.
But yeah, I can slice those up in the timeline, and then you go into the color pane of Resolve, right-click on the preview window where the image is at, and select Grab All Stills. Then all the stills will go into the gallery of Resolve, and then in the gallery you select all, and then you export the stills. And you
So
can,
when you could grab all stills, it'll just grab one image from each clip.
yeah, since it's sliced it up in the timeline already, it'll get everything, and you have to do it inside the color tab.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, I'll give it a shot. It'll be fun. I was thinking it'd be fun to make posters of that. Anyway, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I like Mickey's solution. I'm going to give that a try. But I think what you really might want to look at is, instead of an NLE, how about an ingest app, which will automatically generate a thumbnail as it's ingesting the footage.
It just has to cut it up. So something has to cut it into scenes. Like that's the, cut per cut. I mean, that's the part that the ingest app doesn't usually do.
Scene detect. It's a
scene detect on the way. Yeah. All right, we're going to have to go into kind of a speed mode to get through this. So next question.
Greg Gibson of Washington, D.C. I see that Andy Carluccio is on the panel this morning after the great second hour on Zoom OSC. I'm wondering if any of the panel has been able to implement the app into your workflow and what specifically you're finding useful.
No one's done it yet. Okay, Victor has.
No, I haven't done it yet. It is my goal for January 1st to implement this into my workflow, and I will get it done.
And we are going to try to drag Andy in to do like some little, I got to talk to him offline about, my goal is to have us get together on Saturdays and kind of work through that, like a couple things so that we get over the hump, go ahead, Andy.
I can say real quick that I've started to try to do some live working sessions. Actually, just the first of them last night. Just trying to talk with people as I'm building the tool and make sure that it's in line with what you're looking for. The next update to Zoom OSC is going to be super production focused. And so this group has been really helpful in giving feedback on that. And so it'll evolve alongside you all as we start to interface more.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I definitely want to drag you into some conversations where we do like an hour or two and we kind of set up a challenge. You could go do this with Zoom OSC and then have everybody do that, have maybe get a couple videos of how to do it and then everybody go do that. And then next week we talk about that and then do another one. I think that 3 or 4 weeks of that or 4 or 5 weeks of that, and you'll end up with a whole bunch of people that understand how to use it.
And I'm trying to make time, and as you've seen in my schedule, to try to be on this panel as often as I can to help answer those questions or interface and get that done. And I'm learning a ton too. So it's been great.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. Next question.
Ron from West Michigan, says, for people who don't need or want an XLR mic and something like a Focusrite box, what are your preferences? Zoom NT USB Mini versus Blue Yeti versus something else, maybe?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's many out there that you can choose from. Of course, the Blue Yeti are really good. They have the Yeti Mini, but it has less control over the Yeti for the input and the output. IK Multimedia makes a few microphones. If you have a boomy room, you might want to get more of a dynamic microphone than a condenser microphone. And then Fifine has been popping up recently, Fifine. And I've tested a few of those USB mics, and they do a really good job. And you can either get tabletop, podium, or microphones like this one that you can't see off camera.
And to your point, and to, I guess, what Tony was asking earlier, is the one that I've used a lot for Mac Break when I'm not on, when I'm traveling, is the Shure Motive MV51. And Leo seemed to like it when I was on the other end of it. It is a USB-based microphone, $200, very small, so it's easy to fit. It's small, very heavy, but it fits into your, and it's got, it does have a quarter 20, and it can stand up on a table. And it can connect to, you can convert it to a quarter 20, but it has a mic. You can unscrew the back little rubber piece and put in a standard mic mount. So it's a pretty well thought out USB mic at $200. I think it's probably still the one that I would use. Next question.
I want somebody to make a product called Boomy Roomy. That'd be cool. Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia says, best uses for the new Apple AirPods Pro. I got them for Christmas. Congrats, Tony.
A couple things would be to watch. There's a handful of Tiny World on Apple TV, or if you're watching on your iPhone or iPad or anything that will support the AirPods Pro, is pretty slick. They do a lot of good work. Ford versus Ferrari is really, really good when it comes to some of the surround stuff that is done. It's pretty well. And then if you're willing to spend the money on it, the hi-fi version of Tidal has a bunch of Atmos stuff that I'm just going to warn you that once you listen to Atmos music, it's really painful to go home. Like to go back to, there's not that much of it. There's only about 100 songs between about 3 different playlists. There's like 100 songs that are hidden inside of Tidal. But once you hear them, you're like, you just want to hear everything like that. Like it's just painful. It's just because the voice is more present and everything else is out there. So anything else? Anybody else has any suggestions? Next question.
Our friend Hausmuck is back in with, my office hours lexicon is evolving. I learned what screen scraping is, when my mic is hot, when there is bleed in my yes audio chain, and so on. Yesterday, I paid attention to shading. What is camera shading?
Camera shading is generally, in post, you don't have to worry about it. You have to get reference, but you're going to color grade, as we would call it, color grading but shading is really usually color grading live. So you are affecting all the colors and particularly the exposure. So typically you shade the cameras, you match the cameras together first before the show. During the show, 99% of your work is simply changing exposure. And then there's a bunch of tools that'll let you do that relatively quickly. And you're usually changing that exposure by affecting the aperture, and so you're not doing a lot of other things to the camera. You hopefully aren't, because once you start jumping into new color, it's really hard to get back. So usually it's just exposure. When you get a shading operator will mostly be doing exposure, but getting everything, the first thing you'll do is match all the cameras, but all of that kind of lives, a shading operator will tend to do all those things, but it's really managing the exposure between shots. And a lot of times you'll see, your program, and when the TD puts something into, usually what happens is the TD puts something into preview, or if you have a shading piece of hardware, Blackmagic's shading hardware, you can, as you click on you just tap on any given camera and it sends out of the aux, it sends you back the other image. So you can look at whatever camera you want to match it to the camera that's there. So you see program or preview, and then you see a camera that you select on the other side, and you just try to get them to look the same. Oftentimes you'll break that out so that you see 2 scopes. So you can look at it and your eye tells you that they match, and you look up and you see that they match in the scopes as well. So those are kind of what you'll do if you're a shading operator. It's a pretty stressful position because you're making changes almost constantly to the cameras in a professional environment. Professional live environment, it'll be almost constant, and you'll see when it doesn't work in football stadiums that have large overhangs where there's a lot of shade, like half the thing is shade and half of the sun. You'll see that's the shading operator's nightmare, because they can't get it all together. So you'll see things blown out, and you'll even see the camera changing in exposure as you're watching it, because they're just trying to keep up. Go ahead, Hausmuck.
Yeah, I'm serious about the lexicon that I'm picking up. 2 weeks ago, I was on a call, and I remember Mickey telling me during mic checks one day, Hashmuk, there's a bleed somewhere. Being medical, I was totally confounded. I said, what do you mean there's a bleed? He says, well, there's an open speaker somewhere. I said, oh, okay, speak tech. I understand what you're trying to tell me. So 2 weeks ago, I was on a call and I said the same thing to somebody. There's a bleed there. He says, what do you mean?
Yeah. So, and usually, and what's funny is the terms. I never really thought about it that much, but like when I'm on Twit, if I'm visiting Twit, and they don't, Leo has in-ear monitors, but I have to listen to the bleed, and so I realized that I asked, can you bring the bleed up a little, for me before the show, and I didn't think that probably doesn't translate well.
I think you should give us all a certificate. We should graduate at a certain point.
A new vocabulary. It's like vocabulary from school, but different kind.
Yeah. Write some kind of mini quiz or exam, and then I can say I'm a graduate of office hours.
When you could have like multiple choice. When someone says you're hot, what does that what does that mean? That like you should consider a modeling degree, a modeling thing, or your mic is too high.
Go to modeling school or turn it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Which context?
Yeah. Next question.
Okay, Charles Hodge of White Lake, Michigan says, why do some videos appear mirrored? And we've discussed the line before.
Well, no, I think that this is more of a issue of mirrored if you turn your mirroring, my understanding is if you turn your mirroring off for yourself in Zoom, you look mirrored when you watch it on, everybody else sees you mirrored. So if you leave your own mirrored, because I think that internally it mirrors whatever video it's getting. And so we found that if people who are really particular about that and they turn their own mirroring off, they look backwards to everyone. And you only notice it if you have text, like and we flipped all kinds of things in the background because if you have text, you suddenly, otherwise most people won't notice. Some people will notice like, well, the geometry of their face is way different. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I turned off mirroring on my own view of myself, and I don't think I'm coming in, what I have here with text that I can show.
Maybe they fixed it. I know that there was for a while it was, if you have text that we can read there, just write something on something and put it up.
Apple logo?
Oh, the Apple looks correct. So
I can read iPhone.
Yeah. Nope, that looks correct. So no, my assumption is incorrect there. Because for a while it was like people would turn that off and immediately get themselves backwards. So that must have been fixed at some point.
And we did see for a while people who had signs in the back of them and their signs would come up mirror flipped as what we were seeing. And that is a part of this flipping.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
Well, the only other thing is if you're using like a TikTok or even with the streaming software that I have, I can can flip things around to make it look correct in Zoom. So if it's not that, that's the other reason why is because they're probably using some other software.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas. Is Anker the clear choice for a data hub? I wouldn't say so.
Go ahead, Bill.
I've had the best overall response of just works always and doesn't mess up in my experience has been with OWC. Yeah. I'm not saying other things aren't good and that there's not things, but OWC's engineering team seems to get hubs really stable and really reproducible, and they just work when you plug them in all the time. So that would be my number one.
Yeah, I think that OWC is kind of taking the lead on most of these components. Go ahead, TJ.
For just a simple plug-in, not powered, USB extender anchors work fantastic.
Yeah. Next question.
Ashadev is in with, why would the Jedi Council here, how would the Jedi Council here rate the BBC's recording of the Queen's Christmas message? The Queen being pro showed no signs of reading a teleprompter. Am I missing, or was I heard something about that being a deep fake?
Go ahead, Stuart.
All right, just quickly, I went through the YouTube feeds and found one that I've just put in the chat, which is the royal family's own YouTube channel. When you look at the difference between this, the ITV copy and the BBC copy, the colors on the BBC copy are wrong. It's just the moment you look at it, you'll see it looks compressed, it looks grayed out. So I would have a look at the one that I put the chat in from the royals. And Her Royal Highness has been around cameras longer than most of us. If you go back and have a look at her own personal photography work and cinematography, she understands the medium. So when it comes to being in front of a camera and reading a script, she's been doing that since before teleprompters existed. For the skill level and the experience, I would expect not to be able to see the eyes move. That's just the level of competence that she's shown.
The best presenters will not use a teleprompter. They'll memorize the whole thing. It's not that hard. Like if you're an actor, you just know that you can learn it. Like you can, if you're going to have something, you can learn a 10, 15 minute, 20-minute monologue if you work at it. And she has more time than most of us. So anyway, John and then TJ.
She also writes most of those herself.
Right.
The deep fake was on channel 4 and was a separate thing. There was a deep fake though.
Okay, good. TJ and then Stephen.
Not only has she been doing stuff with cameras longer than most of us, she's been doing it longer than most of us has been alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Stephen, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, there was a thing also done with KPMG that shows up on the Royal Channel that is bad. No other word. I mean, here's KPMG money with the royal family, and it's utterly bad.
I'm always amazed at how people underinvest in. You have a moment with someone really important, and then we're not going to spend the money that is required to take advantage of it and make it a moment. as opposed to just another piece of video that goes through the system. It's something that I've had to work on a lot. Anyway, next question.
Leo Mendel of London is next up with, you covered that a Facebook portal will up the call quality on Zoom. Does that work for the models, Mini Portal and Portal Plus?
The answer is yes. We don't have to discuss it. Yeah, the answer is yes. All of them work. Next question. I'm trying to get through them just so we can get to
I was moving some over. Next question, Victor of Brookings, South Dakota, in the panel. On my iPhone now with my Wi-Fi network, I get a privacy warning that says the network is blocking encrypted DNS traffic. I checked with my vendor, Mediacom, and indeed they block SSH and VPN traffic by default. Their site said they could baseline my modem, and I don't know what that means. Does anybody have a help?
John, real quick. I'll move on.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on this and discovered that baseline is basically a privacy setting, so that they are basically content filtering your traffic and analyzing all your traffic right now. And by baselining it, they're telling you they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's why it's breaking everything.
And if you're still using their modem, unless you have to.
And I don't. I have a modem in front of it, and their solution said that they would make it, so that I could use my own modem. I already do. But does anybody know a way that I can test whether I can receive?
You absolutely want them to baseline it. You never want them to look at your stuff.
No.
So baseline is definitely something you want to request.
Okay.
Next question.
And the last one before we get to our educators. Brody Hefner of New York City says, Alex described pulling the one thumbnail per frame scene from a video. Does this effectively result in a storyboard of the video? If not, how is it different than a storyboard?
It's similar to that. Yeah. I mean, it would, and Bill, I keep on pushing that other one because it's not a second hour. It's not EDU. It's a second hour question. It's trying to get an image from it. I mean, in a perfect world, I was thinking about Bill's automation. It might actually work even better because I could say go in 3 frames or go in 10 frames so that I don't get the absolute first cut of every piece. So I'm kind of interested in that process. So, but the idea is to really get a color, a color montage of a film. This is what I'm interested in doing. The last question.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting to me because I've found that often when you're directing something in video, the very first thing you show in a scene isn't actually the heart of the scene. And that would be exampled by a door opens and we see a character. You don't want a shot of the door, even though that's the first scene. You want to reveal the character once the door is open.
And what Guy is showing is useful, but what I want to see is I think it's pretty to see the actual images. I want to see and I think that's a good one to I think that would be something else I'd want to do. But I think that I'd like to see. I think there's a lot of analysis that could be really interesting. But I think that's a really good one right there. The guy of grabbing those as well. Next question.
Okay, the one that I.
Oh wow, where's that guy? What is that from?
Space Odyssey 2001.
Is that all? Is just that? Wait, each one of them, or is it? Oh, it's comparing. Yeah, so it's different ones. What website is showing all of these?
I can't hear you. I'll have to. It's torwardddatascience.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Last question.
Okay, Keenan Campbell from Princeton, Illinois. Could we do an in-depth tutorial on video scopes and possibly audio hijack and chain?
We have done a couple rough ones in the past. And so what I'm going to do is we are going to do more scopes in the future. So in January, in fact. So we'll talk more about scopes again and again and again, because it's important to understand it. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick stop. If you are an educator and you haven't already raised your hand, raise your hand. And we'll get you in here. And then we're going to go ahead and start. Mickey will start doing mic checks while I go grab some tea.
Alrighty. Hey guys, you guys know the drill. Please put your first name, last name, and location in Zoom. And on the meters, the goal is to hit -24 on the short term. Let's start off with Chris Clark.
You can push me back to attendee at any time, mate, and I'll make space for education panel and enjoy the rest of the show, guys.
All right. Have a good one, Stuart. All right. Let's start off with Chris Clark and then move on to Aaron Graham afterwards.
Good morning from Tempe, Arizona. The weather's nice. We had a great Christmas celebration. I didn't get anything on my office hours wish list, but it was too complex. The potential gift givers didn't understand the technical jargon, so just told me to
give us
sit
maybe
closer
two
to the mic.
if
Say
you could
again.
give us if you could give us maybe 2 or 3 dB down, Chris.
All right. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3, 4 from Tempe, Arizona. We're looks like we're close.
Give us a tiny bump up.
All
Chris.
right. I think we're there. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4 from Tempe, Arizona.
One more bump and you should be right there. Aaron and then Kent afterwards.
Good morning from Boston, where it is 32 degrees again. However, we had 2 days of 50 and 60 degree weather, so our beautiful white Christmas is now a muddy brown Christmas.
That's a good check. Thank you. Kent and then Benjamin.
Good morning. Hope everybody is doing well. I haven't really done a lot with my mic here, so it looks like it's a little bit hot, maybe. And so I'm going down here, and we will see what happens. Back up just a little bit, and I'm using the dial on the mix pre, so I don't know if it's really sensitive or not. So I'm going up. Is that
might have
good?
overshot just
Okay.
a bit, so back off.
All
back
right,
off,
so I'm gonna back off a little bit here and then see how it looks. So it looks like we're in the neighborhood, maybe, right? So let's see how that looks. Is that getting closer there, Mickey?
Just give us one dB down.
Okay, and then down a little bit, and this is cool. All right.
Yeah. What mic are you on, Kent?
It's a Shure SM7B.
Going into the mix pre. Yeah, I'm just hearing
so-
some system noise. Quick question. On which mix pre do you have?
It's the 3.
Yeah. Any chance you might have other faders that aren't being used that are up right now?
Yeah, there might be. Yeah, there was one up there. Did that make a difference?
It's so much cleaner now. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Well, thank you for that.
No
that was worth
worries.
the price of admission for today.
All right. Thank you, Benjamin, and then Emily afterwards.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm just gonna, this feels very similar to yesterday, except somehow I'm just a little bit quieter in the mornings. So I bet I'm gonna still have to bump down later, but this is probably about, almost there. It's probably almost about right if I'm just hanging out here eating my yogurt.
Yeah, maybe you just give us another dB down, Benjamin.
Sure thing.
Thank you very much, Emily, and then Tony Mobley.
Good morning from Red Hook. We also had a muddy brown, nasty Christmas and lots of flood water, which is kind of awesome. Not. And it looks like my level's pretty good. And do you need me to go up or down? I'm good, Mick.
No,
Right?
I think you're in good shape. Thanks, Emily. All right, Tony, and then Trevor afterwards.
Happy holidays to the Office Hours family. Tony Mobley here, pyle mic into ATEM Mini using the Video 360 4K camera.
Tony, on the ATEM, maybe just give us one click down on your level.
That is one click down. I am also using the Apple M1 8 gigabytes version.
Excellent. That is a good check. Thank you. Trevor. Not hearing you, Trevor. What interface are you on?
Of course, this is always the question. How do you describe what interface you're on when your mic's not working?
Of course. It's late.
It's just...
think we could hear you. You're just very quiet.
Yeah.
All right. Can I
Yeah.
hear you? Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Just you're coming in pretty low, so just go ahead with your check.
All right. Well, it's nice to be back. Been crazy busy lately. I haven't been able to make the panel in a while. Sadly, I'm on I'm on my desktop because my Apple is still in the shop, and it's only been gone for 15 days on my brand new $4,000 laptop. So on a PC day. All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Maybe just give us a 2 dB down, Trevor.
How's that? Trying to get a good idea of how this Yamaha board works.
One last tiny nudge down, and you should be right there. Thank you.
All right.
I'm
thanks.
keeping every day my fingers crossed about it on my equipment keeping going, because I know that, for example, all the Apple stores are now shut down in California, and everything is really hard to get the normal. I want to get it fixed, or I want to get a part or something. It's like, if Amazon can't do it to the door, I'm out of luck.
Mine was brand new, and when I went to buy it, they actually opened up 12 brand new MacBook Pros, and they were all dead. So mine was the 13th.
Really?
And it is stuck to that lucky level.
What model did you order? Which model?
It was the 16. I got it at the end of September.
So a 16-inch MacBook Pro, not the M1 series that they're shipping now.
Did that pallet like drop off the truck or something?
Yeah.
They won't tell me what was wrong. My assumption is because of the pandemic, they were shut so long. They're shipped with such a small amount of power that they actually ran the lithium batteries down below the recharge rate. You know, if you get a lithium too low, it won't charge anymore. And I think that's what had happened to all of these. So I got a free upgrade, which was nice, but I keep having issues with it. So I don't know. It's been at the shop, like I said, for quite a while. So hopefully they actually fix something.
And my 16's been one of the best laptops I've ever had. So there is always an anomaly possible.
Yeah, that's my hope.
We're switching gears to EDU, which we're already in to some degree. But I'd like to thank everybody for coming in on a Christmas Saturday to keep on discussing it. And we've got questions already starting up, so we're just going to jump into them. I've got a question, but only if we run out of time. Well, let's start with this, just because I think that it's useful to at least kick it off. I think that the new COVID bill, $82 billion earmarked for education. What should we spend it on? What do you think schools should spend it on? As educators, as students, what do you think? Where do you think that money should go?
Survey from teachers says teacher salaries.
Yeah. But what would make your job easier, given that that's probably not going to happen? What would make your job easier as far as tools and infrastructure? Go ahead, Tony.
I'm just going to join the bandwagon and drink the Kool-Aid and say all students, iPads, all teachers, MacBooks, as much technology that can be thrown at the students as possible, and more project-based learning integrated into regular instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to stop there because I could keep going.
Other educators or administrators have any opinion? Go ahead, Trevor.
I will say I don't really want to support Mac. I do like the idea of real laptops rather than Chromebooks for a lot of our students, though. There's so much more.
I think that fundamentally, I mean, the issue, the issue with Mac versus PC when it comes to a teacher is that the creation tools on the PC are unequivocally about half the quality of the Mac. Now, it may be harder to manage the Mac, or it may be different to manage it, but the ability to actually build videos and build the building tools for teachers are just way behind on the PC. Like, they're just horrible. Like, and I've had to use them for years on, we have to develop on them. And as a Mac person, you just go, wow, you're in a cave, like the whole time. Now, I get that there's things that are easier to administer for the PCs. It's just that what I think about as teachers, like, for instance, no matter how much people talk about it, there is something wrong with PowerPoint and note and Google Slides, and you can't quite figure out what it is. It's just the way that it does the text and in the way that it puts it together, and I have to build presentations inside of Slides and inside of PowerPoint. And so I've done that for 20 years. I've spoken at Microsoft conferences, showing stuff. It's not that I don't know how to use the tools. I've worked with their experts. They're just not as good as Keynote. Like the secret for a long time is no matter what company was putting up their presentations on stage, all of us in the AV world would convert all of their slides to Keynote quietly. Like we would just move them all over to Keynote, and then we'd clean everything up. And then when they sent us a new deck, we would update their Keynote deck, and we would never tell them because oftentimes they were the ones making the presentations, and then people found out, and then we had to go back to it, and then it all looks like crap. Sorry. So anyway, so the problem is that for teachers, they have this stuff that's like, and I will say that as a trajectory, when USDZ hits pages in Keynote, it's going to be over. What you can do on a Mac side when it comes to being able to throw 3D objects into scenes, it's going to be really, really painful to not be on those. So that's the only argument I'll make. I get that from an administration perspective, it could be more difficult. From a pure tools, there's no equivalent to iMovie, like really. I mean, there's editing tools on the PC, but they're not equivalent. Like they're not the same. Like they're not as good, not close as good, And so, I mean, for someone who doesn't do video, I'm sure they look the same. But for someone who does video, the tools are infinitely better on the Mac, And so that's the hard part. And you look at teachers, and when I work with teachers at school systems that are PC, I just watch them crippled. And I watch, and then I work with Mac ones, and they're just doing things. They're just doing a lot more with their students creatively. I got into a discussion with someone. I don't know if he's here, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but about the reductiveness of Google Classroom, of classrooms, all the Google stuff and all the Microsoft stuff, the reductiveness that makes it easy to manage classrooms and to manage, fleets of computers is detrimental to the actual teachers and students, so it's easier to manage, just not easier to use, and that's the challenge I think a lot of people are going to have. Go ahead, John.
We had a teacher credential program that was an iPad program. Being in the Apple ecosystem and giving all the students an iPad, knowing exactly what hardware they had and how it would function, really made that it was a distributed online program work well. The secondary effect was that when these teachers went into classrooms that were Chromebook based, they were very frustrated because they had so much more power with their iPads than they had with the Chromebooks.
Right. And that's the thing I see with my kids. I get it because I sit there and watch, I get how easy it is for them to manage the Google Classroom. And so the things are managed. I think Apple really dropped the ball on that part. The management part, the part that I think Trevor is pointing to, the management part of the fleet, Apple has totally dropped the ball. So that is the fundamental issue that happens there. But the actual execution of content is way better on the Apple platforms than it is on the PC and Google platforms. That's
Michael Slade, who did an incredible thing. We were doing iBooks, now called books, that were assigned to students that populated Google Docs. So we combined them together. The companies may not like to work together, but when you put them together, it's an amazing platform.
Yeah.
What I would do with the money, Alex, is figure out a way to give teachers more time and for them to work more collaboratively with other teachers. I really want to throw it at hardware. Teachers are incredible resources, but we ask them to do impossible things with limited time. You would not have any business where you would have one person needing to deal with 45 people at a time without any assistance or aid or monitor. So if we could use that money to provide, I have to change my word. I was going to say teaching teams, but now we want to teach Zoom. But if we could come up with more time for teachers and more collaboration, I think we'd see the major changes. I don't think the money's going to go there, but that's where I'd put it.
I think you're going to spend most of it on plexiglass. Steve, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead. I can't hear you.
Double mute.
I just want to make a point on the PC versus the Mac. We were pretty much a Mac-based department, and then with the Creative Suite, we then said, okay, people can work it with the PC as well, and and got off the Mac only. And I just saw the service and the support just went way up. You were supporting the blue screen of death all the time on the PC side, and on the Mac side, I mean, for years we had literally very small support issues, and then the PC came, and then it just seems like we're boggled down with more service stuff than the education stuff. So given the choice, and I've seen this over the course of 10-12 years, absolutely you'd want to steer closer to the Mac, or just for support on that side.
And Trevor, a question for you is why don't you want to support the Mac as opposed to a PC?
Yeah.
What makes the PC side better to support?
Really, it's just the total management. It's also really confidence in the manufacturers. So for me, if I have a Lenovo, I have any of our normal Dell, HP, if I have a device that goes down and it's not a fast fix, I have a new device cross-shipped. Apple, through this whole experience, so I from learning here and all this, I built an entire setup focused on my MacBook Pro, and they pretty much literally gave me the finger and like, sucks to be you. Sorry your Mac doesn't work. Sorry that all this is done. We'll get to it when we can get to it. And I've never had that horrible of an experience with a vendor. And Lenovo tech support is horrible. They're just abysmal. But with all of our vendors, if I have a device go down, and it's not fixed immediately. So like one of our brand new Lenovo laptops, we had a teacher spill water on it because they love our equipment so nice. I had a tech out on Christmas Eve from Lenovo doing a repair for us.
But here's the question. How many Lenovo's do you have in the system?
Only about 100.
And how many Macs did you have?
We have about 20 Mac devices. And
I mean,
each of those Mac devices is like 5 times the price of those Lenovo's too.
The reason I ask is because, as a company with about, at one time, we had about 50 Macs. We had someone that felt like they were from Apple that felt like, and this wasn't a school, this was just a company, felt like they were dedicated to us. like it was like literally, if a computer was wobbling, there's some number that most of these companies get to where you become a different status inside of their support system. And when you're under that, you're, like everybody else. And when you go over that, and I don't know what that number is, I just know that at about 50, we would get computers felt like they were sending them to us faster than they broke. Like, like it would be like, hey, there's a problem. And I have another computer the next day, and I would send that one back as I needed to, and I think I had the biggest problem I had was they were doubling up. They would send me stuff faster than I got it to them. So I think that there is also a thing about the number of installs in a given location that changes what we make decisions about what it looks like. And it should be the same all the time, but it is different when you have more than 30 or 40 or 50 of them. There's some number there where most companies shift gears and do something different than what they're doing there. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I think as we're spending this imaginary money, which is always fun to do, right? We need
especially when it's $82 billion.
Yeah,
like sometimes you think about what you would do if you won the lottery. Right now, the lottery is really high in California. So you go, what would I do if I won, that money, and I pay half of it to taxes, and then so you start working on the half after the government takes its half, and then you go, okay, but this is $82 billion. Anyway, go ahead.
We could, So I think the important thing is it's great to get technology to teachers, but it would be great to have some sort of consultants that could go with that to show people what is possible, to be able to model for them. This is how you do a Zoom call. This is how you do this. This is how you use iMovie. And so to connect that why of why we're trying to get this, as a student learning, and then here's what the technology can do for you. So I mean, a team, an army, Navy SEALs of technology who could parachute into the school and help out the teachers actually
I have
know
to admit,
how to use it.
As part of the first tranche of the money that came out, one of the things that we got pushed into, but office hours was really early on, was I argued we should just have something like office hours for teachers 24, like not 24/7, 12 hours a day. That there were there's a keynote day and a how to make video, hour and all these things. And teachers just knew that they could always come to something where I don't understand how to do this. And there was a bunch of AV professionals, to your point, or online professionals that could just answer the questions in the same format that we're doing here. And it wouldn't, that the cost of that in the scheme of $82 billion would be very small. Like it wouldn't show up, and it wouldn't really show up as a line item, And so anyway, Benjamin.
Yeah, I'll just put it out there. Like the long term, like looking really short term, I can see how people will probably be investing in more plexiglass or hand sanitizer or whatever people need to return to campus. But like thinking really long term, you could almost like somebody, I think Tony mentioned, like more project-based learning, like curriculum revitalization. Like there's a lot of things out there that $82 billion can solve. And hiring might not completely fall under that, but probably, that's a more annual thing. But like a big influx of money, that's the kind of thing that like could develop new curricula, could give every teacher a headset, but could more so, right, like spark
you could spend, I mean, put it in perspective, out of the 82 billion, if you spent $5,000 on every teacher, bought them an Air, a new MacBook Air for $1,000, which is faster than most of the PC options at this point. You get a MacBook Air, you get them a couple webcams, so they can do an overhead, and they can do, they can have their thing. They give them a nice headset, you give them an earpiece, you give them a backdrop and everything else. Spend $5,000 on every teacher. It's still it's only between, depending on how you cut the numbers, it's somewhere between 15 and 20 billion of the 82 billion would get every teacher that. like literally every teacher would have that. And then $500 a student, another 20 billion. So you're still well under the 82 billion, and now you have everybody actually equipped to, take something on and move forward. Then if you spent, I'll argue that if you spent $10 billion on centralized content, so content like basically a shared resource, so that teachers don't have to do an animation about momentum. Like there is one, and a huge team of people that just build things based on requests from teachers. So teachers don't have to build all the animations or videos. They make requests, those come in. It doesn't fix everything immediately, but you'd end up with this huge engine that's generating content for them that they don't need to make. That is, cost billions to do, but it would take a lot of pressure off them, in my opinion. Go ahead, Emily, and then Aaron.
All right, couple of things.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you. I was waiting for you to jump out. We were getting to you. I want to let you see the scene before you entered the attack. Go ahead.
I waited a minute. So to John and Ken's point, cross-pollination and giving teachers time to plan and go, hey, this really works, or this is really great. And even to Ben's point, like being able to take that and put it into new curriculum and redesigning that curriculum. My heart broke 2 weeks ago when a teacher was assigned to work with me by the principal, and I looked at their virtual classroom in Schoology, and it was literally photographs of the textbook without even putting in the bare minimum, like for interactivity, so that the kids could fill it out in Google or in Schoology. So like to know that there's teachers out there that are still doing that after, 8, 10 months, 12 months of being online kills me. Like those teachers need to be held accountable and need to have that extra training and need to meet with me, because that's what my job is. Now, as to the device argument that's going on with Mac and everything else, realistically, I can do what I need to do in a classroom with Google, with Microsoft, and with Apple. Like any one of those platforms, I can do what I need to do. Is it easier on some? Yeah. Am I Mac at home? 100% Mac at home. However, I use Chromebooks in probably every school district I work in has Chromebooks. Half of those school districts use Google Classroom. Half of those school districts use Microsoft. Microsoft has far superior tools for assisting students with disabilities like dyslexia, ENL issues, kids that need things translated, things that need to be more visual. Google makes it easier to interact with things. So I made a cookbook with kids last week for Christmas where they wrote their food memory on one side, and then they had their recipe on the other side. I showed the kids how to use that onion skin app that I used to make the coffee video, the stop motion animation thing. Kids did that in an hour. They were excited. They turned it in. It looked amazing. It's all linked. It's live on their website. Anyone in the community can go look at it. It was made in Google Slides. So I think you know, it's more important not to talk so much about, oh, what money are we going to put into what devices and how are we going to manage them and everything else, and talk more about how are we going to make it so the kids want to come to class, because we still have a big chunk of kids that are missing from the classroom. We have teachers leaving consistently. We've had multiple teachers retire in the middle of the year. We've had teachers leave and go work for other companies because they don't like the uncertainty. There is so much uncertainty in what we're doing right now that the anxiety level is really high. It's high for me, like not knowing like, oh, you're going back January 19th. Okay, well, is that long enough? Because the Thanksgiving spike is spiking right now. In my area,
I don't
there are
know, as a parent,
2,000 cases a day.
As a parent, I don't know when my kids are going back to school. Like right now, I don't know. I don't know. They said January 4th, but now they're saying January 19th, and then they're not sure of that. And you're just kind of like, dudes, like, you know, like there's a bunch of us parents that are about to gang up on the school because we're about to say, hey, let's just shut this off until the end of the year. Like there's a bunch of us here that are about to start getting really nasty about it because we're just tired of being jerked around. Like, I don't care. You know,
the
like I
teachers
do.
are tired too. The teachers are tired of not knowing next week or tomorrow if we're going to be at home. And then to talk a little bit about the money, and then I'll let other people talk, is in our district, we went to a yellow zone. In our community, we went to yellow zones, which means that we now have to test 20% of our population over the course of 2 weeks. And guess who pays for the testing? The school district. It's not the state that's paying for the testing, the COVID testing, the 20% that you have to provide. It is not, you know, anyone outside. It's the school district has to provide the testing materials. So all the swabs, they have to pay for the test, and they have to pay for the training for the school nurses. And then they have to get a percentage of the student body to sign off to agree to be tested at school. And that's our biggest hurdle right now. If those parents don't sign that, we can't go back to school because we can't do 20% of the population every 2 weeks or whatever it is that they want us to do. So that money that, you know, looks so big and massive right now, when you break it down, I was looking at it. I'm going to get really upset right now. $35 million of that breakdown is for abstinence only training. We're in a freaking pandemic. I don't think that that's a problem right now. I think we need to focus on the actual problem. And so like earmarking $35 million for abstinence only sex training, like who cares? We need to get over these problems of teachers not being able to use tech appropriately in the classroom. All right, now breathe. And you guys can take over again. But like, if you look at the nitty gritty of where that money's going already and what it's earmarked for, there are some big problems with that because people have their interests in what they're going to do. And then to put the testing on the school district itself is going to cripple the school districts.
Well, yeah. And yeah, I mean, trying to send, anyway, go ahead, Aaron.
So completely back up everything everybody has said, especially Emily, that was great. Don't know how I can really follow that, but I would say very basic, giving every family and every school much higher running fiber for internet, because my kids are attending every day. I've had maybe one kid absent every day, not every day, but no more than one, but they keep dropping in and out of internet. So when they come back after their Chromebook or their internet drops them, it's kind of difficult to pull them back in and have them not be as frustrated. So I think that's my biggest challenge.
I mean, we have the problem that without the second internet connection in my house, that costs a lot of money because it's a microwave. I've got Comcast that has 10 up. And the issue that I have is that my wife runs Zoom meetings for a living. I run live events for a living, and I'm in 6 hours of meetings a day. And then I have two kids that are both going to school, and that's not enough bandwidth for 10 megs up. And so a bunch of us are trying to persuade Sonic. We're like, how many houses? Like, I'm talking to Dane about this. How many houses do I have to have available to Sonic before it's worth running the fiber? Because we're trying to figure out if a whole bunch of us can all promise to, or like pay up front, even if we all have to pay an extra $200 or something like that to get Sonic into our houses so that we have a 1 gig connection as opposed to a Comcast connection, you know. And then there's a whole battle with Comcast because Comcast doesn't want to give us poll rights. So then that will require me to take an online, public battle, try to get them on Marketplace and beat beat the bejeebers out of them. So there's like a whole calculation here of trying to do it, and that's in a pretty high end neighborhood as opposed to what and it's definitely not average. And we're fighting because all of our kids are having trouble getting connected because the parents are home working as well and using the same bandwidth, and that's the best we can do in where I live. Benjamin, and then Chris, and then John.
I'll just put it out there, right? Like I live on a street where Sonic came literally 5 blocks down the road like a year ago. And there's a street full of paying customers who are all paying Comcast. And I am absolutely convinced over half of them, or even right where we are right now, almost all of them would probably switch. We're getting crummy, just like you, we're getting crummy Comcast. There's a street full of people. They literally ran the fiber to the other end of
pole
the street.
access. It's not Sonic, it's Comcast. They're not giving them pole access.
But they already have permission. We found out recently they're just delaying. I have a feeling
Sonic
they're getting an unprecedented wave of demand.
They could be.
But we'll see.
Could be. Yep. Chris?
I think we should use that $82 billion to calm down. It's all about calming down, slowing down. This is not an editorial comment about Emily's righteous indignation. I think that's a beautiful way to interact with the situation. Uncertainty is a killer, as we've heard. People are leaving either literally or emotionally and intellectually. They're leaving the classroom. They're giving up because they've been abused, in a sense, by our effort to keep things going as intensely as they were before the pandemic through a drinking straw. It's, all of the tools of human interaction that teachers have built their careers around and their expertise around have been taken away from them by the novelty for most teachers of teaching virtually, and all the complications that we've discussed here at great length. So my constructive solution is to experiment with 3 days a week of school. Let's do less, and let's think creatively about how to use the time between direct interaction between teachers and students. Part of it is preparing to make those interactions better, more engaging, and more effective. Part of it is about training in better use of technology. Part of it is about sort of psychological mutual support. The telling of the stories of our successes and our frustrations among teachers who get it because they're in similar situations and they don't have to start from scratch or be characterized as whiners and complainers and people who aren't up to the task of doing their duty. I know it would complicate the lives of parents and others who count on schools as childcare centers, but there'd still be some of the 82 billion left to upgrade what we used to call recreation centers. Should schools be burdened with all of the functions that they serve and that teachers serve beyond teaching and instruction? I don't think so. But now there's a time and a place for redirecting some of that money to high quality childcare and recreation and the arts and so forth. Maybe the arts belong in an arts center, a performing arts center, more than they do after school at the high school. So that's my idea. Basically, it's to do less of what's filling our teachers' lives with anxiety and subpar performance, and then to think creatively about how to solve the problems that creates for parents and other caregivers, and then to provide ways for teachers to locally creatively support one another and solve the problems and heal the wounds that they've been treated to over the last 9 or 10 months.
I have to admit,
sermon.
I have to admit that something that is a seed that has entered my mind in the last couple of weeks, because this whole issue has not been probably as traumatic for me as other people. Our family was pretty tight before it began, and my daughter's learned to play the bass pretty well and the keyboard. My son has gotten into electronics in a different level. They, in addition to, school has been more of a challenge for my son than my daughter. And so the school part has been hard, but the thing that I don't think I thought about, I thought about this in college before, but it's starting to kind of eat at my mind now, is whether it's a good idea to have a whole bunch of kids all in one place at one time anyway. I know that'll sound very rough, but for 2 million years, we didn't really do that. It's very, in the evolutionary scale, it's very short term that we've done this idea that kids will spend most of their time with other people their age, which creates its own kind of social weather. And I have noticed that I feel like my kids are more centered now than they were before. I think school, for at least my kids, my observation was as a parent, I kind of had to unlearn them from what they were learning, not from a information perspective, but a social perspective. I kind of had to undo that. And to Emily's point about what they were being taught, pretty much that whole area of all of those things, as a parent, it's something I don't want school to do. like not just abstinence, but not any of it. I'm just like, stay in your lane. As a parent, I'm like, and I'm a pretty hard-edged parent when it comes to that kind of thing. Is I just think schools should stay in their lane, and stick to the information and stay out of that, that stuff. And so, so I don't want them earmarking any of that to anything like that, And the fact that schools take that on as a parent makes me very aggressive, about it, because I that's my job, not theirs. And so, but I feel like I often have felt like this when I was a kid, that school was kind of Lord of the Flies, like a whole bunch of kids all in one place, that separating them. And I guess I'm thinking about it more now that my kids have been separated and they're spending most of their time with us, that there's a calmness to them and a resilience there that I felt like we had to recenter them every time they came home. And now I don't have to do that anymore. And so I'm starting to kind of go down this path of, I don't ever want them to go back to school. I want them to get school, but it doesn't have to do with COVID anymore. It's starting to get away from COVID for me in my mind, and starting to get back to, I want them to go hang out with the friends that they find, online, and they have friends and they socialize. I'm not saying they shouldn't socialize. I just don't think they should be forced to socialize as an introvert. Go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say, with Chris's comments, a lot of what you said could have been said before COVID hit. And right. I think Emily pointed out very clearly that a lot of the problems and issues in education and the special interests existed before this bill and got slipped into the bill. Right. And when I look at the COVID crisis, prior to all this, the majority of teachers were spending between $200 and $400 of their own money for school supplies. So let's deduct that and pay them for that. We now have classroom teachers who are now using their own gas and money, taking stuff to kids. So I don't know, Chris, whether your vision could ever get there. We're really talking about a major educational reform. And Alex, your discussions of things of creating content, there's always been this challenge of who approves the content, it's local decisions. We have a textbook puzzling industry, but I don't know whether there's anything that could be done right with these funds, because there was such a dysfunction before It's putting money to fix a broken car rather than buying
you got to
a new
admit
one.
that DC is just one big ball of dysfunction. So it's just kind of like when you see the money go through, you're like, oh, we'll see how this goes. Go ahead. We know that we'll all be frustrated because they're not making good decisions. I mean, they put a copyright bill into the middle of an aid package, because they can't get it passed on its own because the general public hates the idea of adding any more detail. But they are like, oh, we can sneak it in here. I literally have lost confidence in Washington D.C. All confidence in every single member. Benjamin.
Adding on to Chris's point earlier, my high school went with a new schedule from March through June where we took Mondays off effectively. We just didn't have school on Mondays. We had a 4-day school week.
How'd that work for you?
Yeah, I loved it. You kidding me? It was the best. And teachers did too. They were so overwhelmed trying to make the transition that they needed like 50% more planning time. They were just, and it helped everyone's mental health. You had time to do all that.
Would you argue that you could go to that? Do you think you could cover the distance that you needed to if you were just doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Would that make it better?
So I'll put it out there. So we actually the days we would have spent doing final exams, we just didn't have final exams, and instead we had school those days. So we got back those 4 or 6 days that were lost. I think they were really gained, but there's that, and I'm sure
and you're pointing to the limitation
being in a private school,
right?
You're private school, we have that option.
You're pointing to the limitation of the way we track students as well. That all the funding and the accreditation and everything else all has to do with student hours, right?
Yeah,
those days you got back had very little about instruction is what they needed to get their funding. We need to change from seat time to wetware time.
Yeah, and I'll just put out there, right, that the we had school sponsored activities, just kind of hangout times for just optional socialization, and kids led their own classes, and some teachers led some cooking sessions and things like that. And it was really low key, and teachers were allowed to assign homework. And it just made everyone more relaxed. And at that point in the year, that was really important for us. I think it was important for a lot of people, but I dare say it's still important. And I just can't imagine schools moving to a 4-day school week, but I really wish they would.
Yeah. Bill?
So my comeuppance in the whole education thing is that I came into it when my son was born thinking that his experience was going to be at least reasonably similar to mine. Turned out it wasn't anything like that. And my wife is a teacher who spent most of her time in 5th grade. When I got talking to her about the number of kids who were on IEPs or needed ESL or something else, and that she was dealing not with a whole bunch of little clones of me and my experience, but with this broad panoply of amazingly diverse types of human developing kids that all needed different things, I stopped thinking that my experience was transportable. And so one of the things I'm truly appreciative of with the core group of teachers who go into the classrooms is they're not dealing with one thing. They are dealing with 1,000 changing songs that they have to play every day for all of these thousands of different kinds of personalities. And they have to do the best they can, bringing them all along, which is no small task.
Well, and for me, that was a fundamental shift in my approach to teaching was when I taught at San Francisco State. Because when I taught at San Francisco State University in their multimedia studies program, I was working at ILM, so I was like, I'm going to show these teachers how it really is. The reason that they're not able to do it is because, they just don't know what I know and blah, 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 blah. And I showed up and holy smokes, I was slowed down to the lowest common denominator at every moment. And it was a different person, every single question, it wasn't like one kid was slow, it wasn't kids either. These are college students, but it wasn't like one college student was slow. It was that one was slow about this and one was slow about that. And I would get through a third of what I expected to get through in a semester because of that issue. But it fundamentally changed the way the reason the Pixel Corps was formed the way it was, the way that our Rwandan projects were formed, were all as a reaction to that problem, which is that I went to, hey, I shouldn't do things step by step in the classroom because I'll be slowed down. I should have discussion. And then my huge focus on peer-to-peer learning, which is a version of what we're doing here, was all based on the idea and what Discord has and everything else, is that you want people to be in a nutrient-rich environment all the time and let them move at the speed that they need to move at. There are milestones we have to get, but it can't be in a real-time basis. But my interest in these very large groups is so that I can manage that, but it was definitely, it's why I don't do those kind of classes anymore. Like, cause it's just too hard, like anything under 100 people to me is difficult. Go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to say to Chris and Benjamin's point about the shorter work week or shorter school week. One of the districts that I worked in, one of the first districts I worked in, the students were released at noon on Wednesdays, and the teachers stayed, obviously, and we stayed till 4.
This is before or after COVID?
This was well before. This was 15 years ago.
How did the parents feel about Wednesday being a short day?
When they saw the plan that the district put out for why we were going to have short days on Wednesdays, they were very supportive. And not all parents, some were upset that because they relied on it, because it was high school too. It wasn't the whole district, it was the high school. And we were focusing on the fact that we were getting very close to being put on the state watch list. And so what we did was we took those Wednesdays, and they were really structured for the teachers and based around learning in the sense of like, okay, everybody needs to be a literacy coach in the classroom. So how are we going to teach the students or the teachers that teach science, that teach math, that teach, even English teachers, how to be literacy coaches, because they don't know how to support the varied students that they have in their classroom. And then it would move through different structured things throughout the year, but it was all planned out well in advance. So we always knew what was coming up. We were required to be there because it was part of our work day. So no one could be like, oh, well, I have a doctor's appointment that day. Because that happens to the after school stuff all the time, is people are like, oh, I have childcare, or I have to go do this, or I have to go do that. And then you can't get consistency among the staff. So having that Wednesday repeatedly every Wednesday, and it gave the kids a midweek break. So you could assign projects, or they could do after school programs. There were like outside organizations that came in and did dance. Like we had a hip hop class and hip hop Shakespeare, and some other stuff that was of interest to the kids. They could do that. That was outside organizations that brought that in. So the teachers weren't responsible for, watching the kids or training the kids, but they could focus in on that stuff. And our grades did improve. Our students, did improve over time in that situation. And I think that goes back to what John and Chris were talking about earlier about like having that time for common planning and for learning from each other, because there were literacy coaches we already had. We weren't paying outside organizations to come in and train us. We were using the resources we had within our district. And if we needed someone from outside, we'd bring them in. But it was a lot of internal, I did courses on technology and I was the English teacher, but I knew how to use all the tech in the building. And so it was like, this is how you use your Promethean board as not a glorified TV. Like, this is how you can actually interact and use it with your students and demonstrate things to the kids. And so I think that, a lot of times PD that we're given is not, in most places, is not given in a way that makes us feel like we're valued or that we have intelligence. It's like, oh, we're going to do this new thing that you've never heard of. It's Maslow. And it's like, no, we all had a course in Maslow. Like we know what Maslow is. Like, can you up your game so that you can tell me how to work with my group of kids who happen to be super diverse and very far behind, and high school kids. And if I talk to them like a sixth grader, they're going to lose all respect for me. So let's talk about real ways for managing a high school classroom instead of friends, 1, 2, 3 friends. Like, I had someone do that to me in a high school PD. Like, I had no respect for that person. I stopped listening and I went and did some other stuff. So then you miss everything that you're supposed to be learning about during that time. So I think getting back to the crux of it is you really want to be able to give teachers meaningful PD that's helpful to them and to what they need to learn. It needs to be something that they want to learn. Like, it's not being told to them, oh, you have to learn how to do this one thing. It's more like, this is how this is going to work for you, or what do you need? And let's provide it. And then, giving a break to the kids during the week was not, they came back, but we did block scheduling too, which was really tough. It's like 90-minute courses, 90-minute periods with the kids, and you'd only see them every other day. So like blocking that Wednesday out was kind of nice to give everyone a break from that, intense time period.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I think, go ahead, Trevor.
All right, there's a lot to unpack in that. So there's a few things I want to touch on. First, one thing that I think we it's easy to do, but it's a good mindset to break. The one size fits all doesn't work. And all the teachers in here are going to, they've started nodding, because one of the things in teaching is your goal is that one teaching method doesn't work. And so I think for a lot of these, for some, being in a classroom is the best thing to do. I can say for me, there is no online method that'll ever hold my attention. I squirrel too fast. Like even here, when people are talking, I start like, what's going on in Mukana? And if there's not enough engagement fast enough, I'm gone for a while. And it's not that I don't want to be there. It's not that the people aren't smart and it's not intelligent. It's just my brain starts moving too fast and I leave. So there's going to always be some that, for me, sit me down in a classroom, talk to me. I don't even take notes, but I will learn. I'll pay attention. If I want to be there, I'm good. And I think with all these things, we need to do it. When it comes to the money, I think one of the smartest things, hopefully, people will do is don't just look at a now. So like internet's a big one. I agree. We've hit on, I think, in this group a few times, is everyone needs internet. It's why it's not a utility you can have conversations about, but everyone needs internet. And so paying the money to get internet out there and not put it on school districts is a big one. For us right now, I've got a couple $100,000 a year budgeted right now trying to provide internet for our kids. But a lot of those kids still don't have a good connection. We're running over copper wires. We're doing, like, the money should go into those one-time things that, like staff and that, those cost money. They keep going. For us in California, once you've had a person on staff for 2 years, you own them until they do something horrific. We can't, no matter how bad you are, no matter what, we own you forever. So hiring people always scares me, because once you hire that person, it's very hard to make them go away. But things like getting the broadband, getting the infrastructure down, that's really expensive. Running a mile of fiber is not a cheap thing to do. But if you spent all that money going there, you could actually get something done and override the utilities and the telecoms.
Yeah. I mean, I think that somebody's got to start. Everyone's afraid of telecom, like telecom in Hollywood, they spend so much money. I mean, all of our politicians are paid for by them, and so they, it's really hard to get anything done, in those areas. And it's, I'm sorry, I'm so negative. I really, this COVID bill has really turned a switch inside of me that was hidden for many years. I mean, I grew up very much anti, whatever, and jaded and everything else, and it kind of went away. I got kind of, and there was something about that one little thing that they added to the care, this last care package, that just, like, I was like, really, you did that, and it just, and people voted on it. so anyway, but I think that. I think that we as citizens have to start rising up, and using, and when I say rising up, like on the internet, not in the street. We've already seen how much COVID can turn really quickly if everyone goes to the street. But we can use the internet, stay separated, and figure out how to make sure that our Congress, we do have power to kind of push that forward, but we have to start focusing on it. And I think that education is going to be something that it'll be interesting to see, like, I guess, how much we're going to go back, and when we're going to go back. I think that schools keep on trying to go back, but, things could get much more ugly than they are now for a while. Go ahead, Chris.
One quick comment. It's occurred to me off and on that we're underthinking the possible uses of television, which is much more ubiquitous for families and kids at every
You're right.
socioeconomic level than the internet is. So, how about more programming, more Mr. Rogers, more Sesame Street reruns, you name it.
Well, but the thing is that if you look at the delay of someone watching live stream on YouTube is about, depending on what version of it is, between 12 seconds and 24 seconds, let's just say. In broadcast, it's less than that. It can be as little as 7 to 8 seconds of time between it. At most 15 seconds behind. Well, at most a minute. The point is that when you think about cable and you think about even TV broadcast, to your point, I hadn't really thought about it until you said it, so I'm kind of totally riffing here. But you could literally put up broadcasts that were classes, like we standardize across all the school systems, let's say in a certain area, and say, we're going to broadcast an English class or a history class or whatever. And you're going to have other internet conversation. You're going to have other conversations, but you literally could do it. And then if you had something like Mukana or something else behind it, there still could be Q&A, and that could be a live. That's not a broadcast like we taped something and now we're sending it out. It literally could be a live interaction for that period of time where you're getting questions in and answering them, in real time.
Back to live TV. That's the way it was originally, right?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
And live radio.
Yeah.
Well, history repeats itself. When I was in school in Ohio, they had an airplane that flew around and transmitted science classes to the state. In California, there were a number of ITFS networks, closed microwave networks. Schools used to have film libraries, and they would truck them around, and they finally figured out they could do that through microwave. And there were regional groups. I was on the group in Chico that worked with the local public television station and came up with block scheduling of programs that we put over the air. And, we probably need to think back of that whole network of schools getting together, figure the curriculum. I joke that my undergraduate degree was really Sesame Street. My internship was working with a local school district, and I recorded off the air and replayed Sesame Street 5 times. So I was watching it 6 times, the recording and the playback. So I say that was my senior year at Northwestern, was basically Sesame Street.
In Rwanda, in Rwanda, they have a system that doesn't require the internet. So they have we do point-to-point connections into given towns, and then you mesh out from there. And so the thing is that you can actually, and it's all for their education. It's been, I don't know if it's still there, but it was something they were building because they didn't have the LTE and the fiber network up. So what they would do is they'd do point-to-point microwave transmission to a smaller town. And in that smaller town, then you have APs that go out, and it was less expensive. Then it didn't have to go to the outside world at all. And theoretically, I don't know how practical that would be in a school system, but you literally could build something depending on the density of the school, of the population, that didn't require the internet, that could actually run the classes. It's just an interesting.
In Monterey, we had 4 ITFS channels, and they didn't even fill them all up, so they were making money from them. So one of the ITFS.
But I'm talking about, like, you could provide for students. You could provide 1 gig wireless connections to the school. Based on, you would just need to be able to propagate it and everything else. But if it didn't require some internet resource, if it just was teachers talking to the students and having a 2-way communication and showing it, you could be sending 4K if you wanted to every student, inside of that, using a Wi-Fi mesh network mixed with, some fiber and some point-to-points. And that's the kind of thing to get back to spending money once and then having an incredible infrastructure, with the money rather than plexiglasses, which is where we're going to put it all. Let's jump to some questions and we'll go through that.
Okay, the first one comes from James Babbitt of San Diego here, and he says, as COVID recedes and schools resume in-person learning, what will resemble pre-COVID education?
I think it'll go back to where it was. Does anyone think it's going to change? I think it'll just... Go ahead, John.
I think it's going to change, but probably not the way we think it will. I think the increased experience with video and the comfort that students and teachers have gotten in using computers more actively in the long run is really going to change how people do that. Because we've been trying to get technology and getting teachers to use it. And it's always been a small group, the early adopters. Everybody was thrown into the pool. So I don't know what it's going to look like in the short term, but in the long term, eventually these tools are going to be ones that more people are using, and that's going to change the way things happen in schools.
Go ahead, Andy, and then Bill, and then Benjamin, and then Emily.
I think we've seen a couple of good case studies on sort of an optimistic note for today's tone, but that there have been some investments in infrastructure that have actually been quite good in technology, and that that now exists. That's now part of what that institution has, and I hope that continues to be used and becomes part of a tech curricular collaboration, which is that key element that has been missing, at least in a lot of places that I have worked in the past couple of years. So I hope that balance is maintained.
Go ahead, Bill.
There is a model out there, and I run into it when I was in retail for such a long time, that in a store, and I worked for PetSmart for a good bit of time, they would do something, a co-op with Discovery or something like that, and put in a subset in their stores. I think those people understand this idea of carving out a space and making it purpose-built. I will think that education is changing when our schools start seeing that kind of thing. Let's put in a physical plant in the school somewhere that really supports this new kind of education. People know how to do this. This is construction, it's wiring, it's all the rest of the hard skills, and they own the property already. I mean, the schools have this space, and those people in retail who know how to deploy a Discovery Center type thing across 1,000 stores can easily do it across 1,000 schools. They already have the understanding of how it works, but somebody at the top level has to make those kind of initiatives important and start the investment cycle in that.
Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yeah, agreed. I think also there's a real potential for people being used to Zoom, meaning that, like, I'm sure some school out there is going to experiment with one fewer day of in-person school and one day of remote school. And I'm really curious to see how that works out. Just because I'm sure somebody out there is thinking, oh, wow, this isn't so bad. Just to have one day to kind of hang out at home, to be in a comfortable place, and to like on a Monday would be a really good example, right? You ease back into the week. You probably don't make that many slides, and you still get that in-person time. I'm curious if that makes a difference.
And Emily?
Yeah, I think some of the feedback I've gotten from teachers recently when working with them one-on-one is like, I can't wait till this is done and I can just go back to pen and paper in my classroom. And like, that really bothers me because one, they're finally using the tools that can make their lives easier, like Google Classroom, Schoology, Microsoft Teams, whatever it is, just having that communication with the parents, like being able to put up every assignment with links to, the things that go along with it, whether it's a worksheet or pages that they need to read, finding information, they can be really useful. So to have them have this negative mindset right now of like, oh no, when I go back, I'm never touching tech again. And then arguing with me when I try to find the merits, the points of good in it, they're against it. But I do think, to what Benjamin just said too, is that I think there will be schools that are going to experiment with at least making up snow days or weather days. Like we had a snow day the other day and they actually gave us a snow day. And I think, psychologically, we all needed the snow day. And there are issues with connectivity as well. Like if you have a snow event, there may be people without power, without access, or Wi-Fi might be down and things like that. So you can't rely on it being a virtual snow day. But at the same time, I think that these little things creep in, but I don't know how it's going to change because there's a big chunk of people who are just like, I just want to go back. I just want to go back. And I'm like, go back to what? Like, what exactly was working for you before that, you haven't improved upon at all here? Like, if you had the kids face to face and you still had access to the tech, what would make it better? What would make it easier? What would make it more interactive? What would make it more creative? What are the tools that you have available to you? And I don't think that a lot of people, because of the anxiety and everything else that they're feeling right now, can really see that far ahead. So I just don't think they're thinking it. And I think, as soon as they open the schools up, we're probably going to end up for a while just being like, oh, we're back into school and it's normal and I don't have to wear a mask, or I can be, like it's normal. And I don't think that that's a great mindset to have, but I'm interested to see how it flows out after that.
I think my first thing is that when will post-COVID actually happen? The chances of it happening this spring is pretty low. The chances of it happening next fall is still middling. So I think that's the thing that we keep on, everyone's just dying to go back. But the thing is that there's small amounts of doses that are going out. There's a huge number of people who don't want to take them. There's not, it's not necessarily going to be just jumping out into the run. and suddenly everything's going to be fine. Even if everything was going perfectly, it wouldn't happen this spring. That we wouldn't have most of the risk. The second thing I'll say is, just as someone who gets pulled into consulting for venture capital, public schools ignore what's happening right now at their peril. Like, there is so much money warming up. Like, it is like billions and billions of dollars see a gap. And they see that basically what they're looking at is public school systems not responding. And they see that as a market opportunity. And so the thing is that, and so there is like public school systems going back to the way it was. It'll work for a little while, but the issue is that Zoom has improved dramatically, and many other tools have improved dramatically. So all of the substrate that's required to go online and produce a national school system is there, that wasn't there before, and the thing is, and sure, there's a lot of states that are very anti that, but there's a lot of states that aren't, and they're not, what they're looking at is just ignore the states that make it hard. Let's go to the states that make it easy, and then go after test scores, and so I think that it's important for public schools to think about how to find some middle ground and not just go back to where it was before, because I think they put themselves at risk of a huge disruption. Like, I think that there's a massive disruption this decade coming. That if the school systems don't figure out how to adjust, that they're going to compete with something that they can't compete with. They can't, other than legislating themselves out of it. There's no way to stop what's about to happen if the public school system doesn't take the lessons that they're learning now and leverage them. Go ahead, Chris, and then Kent.
To Emily's point about some teachers being reluctant or wishing for the good old days to go back to the way it was. We shouldn't underestimate the power of familiarity. It's not so much about whether it could be more effective if we got better at online teaching and learning. It's that the familiar, we're so hungry and thirsty for the familiar that the question of effectiveness is put to the side. It's all about how can it's like when you take a long trip, there's no place like home, even though home is not as nice as that hotel you stayed in London, but it's familiar. So now the longer we keep working with virtual teaching and learning, as we're likely to do, as Alex says, through the spring, the more familiar that's going to become to more and more teachers, not to everyone, but so I see there's a kind of a potential for healing of this familiarity.
And I think that it's not only familiarity, but the tools are getting better. Like there has never been an evolution of online tools like there has been in the last year. I mean, as someone who's tracked this for the last 30 years, I've never seen anything like it. The number of iterations to all the apps that we use based on a demand, not just by school, but from e-learning, university needs, everything else. It is a incredible, it's like stunning to watch. If you've been watching this for 30 years, as some of us have, it's just eye-popping if you pay attention to it. And that's what's changed. That will never go back. Emily, and then Kent, and then John.
I was just going to say the other thing that, and someone in the Mukana had just said it, the idea that we could share the courses for students that lack those courses in their own districts. So like if my district's too small or too underfunded and I can go take an AP course at another school in my county or whatever who's offering it, but do it all virtually through Zoom, I think that could have a real benefit to providing more equal playing ground to all of our students across, and not dependent on where they live, what zip code they're in.
Yep, absolutely. And again, I think that would point to the temptation there, which would be an accurate temptation, would be to make those classes, those more generalized classes, larger, and then that would build an entirely different infrastructure. I mean, that's what people will do with that. Kent, go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, and the thing is, education moves so slowly, because supposedly education runs by, evidence-based, is there evidence for this to work? Have we done the studies, all that kind of stuff? And then, but what's happening now is it's moving so fast that industry is able to take those kind of risks, but education, by the time we are able to respond to this, it's going to be over for 2 years, so that's one of the hardest thing in education.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah,
maybe like that. I'm going to keep on saying that because we just don't know. I mean, it could be by the summer it's all fine and dandy and everything else, but when they start shutting down the planes coming out of the UK, they're worried. Like it's not like they're not saying that. There's a lot of concern about what's happening there, and that this may not end very quickly. And then they keep on moving the goalposts. We need to pay attention to this as we think about like when this is all going to end. As media developers and as people paying attention to pandemics, the cross information that's being given to us is indicative of, as someone who's worked in the government, worked for the government a lot, when they're saying things, you just have to read between the lines, and the lines are that they're really terrified that this isn't going to work. Like they're putting up a great front, but they are terrified that this whole thing is going to last for 4 or 5 years. Like that's between the lines, and it may never end. Like I was talking to a virologist about that, may never go back to normal. John.
So Alex, when you talk about schools not making the change, I'm not sure the school's the right entity. The schools don't control the development of their teachers. Those are teacher commissions and the universities. They don't control their budget. It's usually the legislature. They have their own boards, but they have limited choices. So, what is the identity that's going to make the change? All those things have to change.
Yeah. That's what I'm not optimistic. Go ahead, Trevor.
Real quick to John, I get yelled at the county level because I say this, but very often when I present stupid things to our board, I say, we're not doing this because it makes sense. We're doing it because it's a requirement from the state. And you watch the whole board roll their eyes and move forward. One of the things I really want to touch on, and we talk around a little bit, and maybe just because, again, I deal with the personnel and the HR, and so I'm sorry if I make anyone mad. One of the things that I think is going to bring us back the most is the teachers. This panel, and I'm sorry, is not representative of teachers. This panel is the people that really care and are there for the right things. Some of you are in California. Wherever you feel about things like teacher pay, we absolutely have teachers who do the job for the money in California. They get paid pretty well. They actually make more than I do on an hourly rate, even when you factor in all their overtime and extra time spent. Some of the best benefits and retirements possible. We have many who, frankly, could care less about kids. It is a very staple pay. As long as they don't molest a kid and get charged and prosecuted for it, they can't really be fired as long as they don't do something else egregious. It is impossible to really hold them to any standard. So for us, as we go back to the classroom, right now, these teachers, they have to teach online, right? Because they realize that right now it's impossible to get away with not doing online. The second we go back, the problem is going to be those same teachers, those ones that aren't, when we have a collaboration, like we do the same thing on Wednesdays, short time collab, they don't show up. They don't want to be there. They don't care. They frankly don't give a damn about kids. It's sad and it's frustrating. It drives up a wall, but we do have those. And one of the things that nobody wants to address is how do we fix that too? Because we can make lots of gains, and we are as a district going to try and hold, like you're staying in Google, whether it's the best or not, it's still a lot better than 40 pieces of paper floating around the classroom every 10 minutes. We have one-to-one Chromebooks. We bought those. We have them. Everyone has digital now. We're going to try and hold the line, but there's going to be those teachers who they're going to go back to that same curriculum that they built 25 years ago, and they're still teaching it. And we've adopted 2 textbooks since then because that's work and they don't want to do it. As a district, the thing I want teeth to actually start solving that at the end of this. When we come back, to be able to say, no, you have to actually get better now. You have to care about the kids. You have to work. You have to work again, not do the.
And I think the hard part is that I think that for most teachers, for most people, I don't think any teacher entered the school system that way. I think that the part of the problem is that the infrastructure of school of the process is the part that really gets people resigned. So it's not, I don't think it's getting teachers that never cared about it to care about it. It's getting them to reignite something in them that died off, and I know so many people in the education system, whether they're principals or teachers or whatever, that came in all, starry-eyed, and then, and this is the case for many things, like corporate government, like you go in thinking that you're going to make a difference. And then there's a cog, that you become a cog. You're not clear of how you make a difference. So I don't think it's indicative of education. I think it's indicative of any large organization. Everything has a certain weight to it, and so I think that I think that it's just a matter of figuring out how to excite those teachers to do that. I do think that, to your point, I mean, I think that is going to be a key piece of teachers willing to play hard, but I think it's a matter of getting them excited, and then at some point, yeah. Anyway, so anyway, Bill, and then John.
Yeah, I was just going to support that. It's not just education, because my wife in our family famously got a job once in sports marketing, and she had nothing to do. That they gave her a little basic training, and then it was like, we promoted you to the next level. And she said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, we don't know. We'll figure out something. 3 or 4 months later, I think they kept her around because she was nice looking and a wonderful person to have around, but she didn't have anything to do. So I've seen that in corporations. The person they laterally moved over out of the way, but kept on for 10 years, even though they didn't really contribute anything to the mission. This is just human dynamics.
I mean, I left Industrial Light and Magic because I got bored. like I was like, okay, am I gonna keep on doing this? I didn't see how, I was, admittedly, I had planned to go to ILM because I wanted to bring that kind of work to education, but the timing of when I left was because I was like, okay, well, I've gotten as much out of this as I'm gonna get. I'm gonna, it's time to go ahead and start moving towards education, which is what I left ILM to do. I had thought that I was gonna be there for a decade, but I was only at ILM for a year and a half. I was at Lucasfilm for another year and a half, and Lucasfilm was much harder and much more rewarding for me, just because it was so challenging. It was so hard to do what I had to do there. It wasn't the same high quality, I mean, because we were just doing animatics, but it was really hard. But again, I knew I was a part of a crew of 4, and if I didn't get done what I needed to get done, I had to explain to George Lucas why I didn't get it done. That keeps you awake at night, or for me, not awake at night, usually working through the night. At ILM, you were part of a big cog, and if you missed a thing, I mean, it would become a thing. I'd have to explain it to somebody eventually, but it wasn't the same thing. And you had great ideas, and you mostly got in trouble by the union to not do that because you were stepping out of your lane. I got a lot of out of your lane conversations by the union, which is super exciting. Go ahead, John.
I don't want to disagree with you, Trevor. I'm sure there are teachers like that, but I want to really emphasize what Alex said. The California State University system, which prepares a large percent of the classroom teachers, I think does a pretty good job of making sure those people who graduate are competent and want to teach. I think something does happen once they get into the schools and get worn down and some of the other issues. But the teachers that I saw coming out of our teacher credentialing program, there wasn't one that I didn't think was a great teacher, and they washed out quite a few. So, but I do think, Alex, like you're saying, that they get caught in the bureaucracy, they get stuck in the politics, and it makes it rough for them to be able to have the energy and enthusiasm when they started teaching.
Yeah, and they get, I think it's a really hard job that's underpaid. You deal with parents like me on one side and other parents on another side, and we're all pretty, I try to pick my battles. There's only a handful of them that I pick because I don't want to put too much pressure on the teachers, but I am difficult if they step into that area, and so that's everybody has their lines. Go ahead, Trevor, and then Aaron.
I do want to clarify real quick. I'm not talking to majority of teachers, so I do want to step out. I am in admin, a lot of yours. So, I mean, you can blame me if you'd like. I absolutely will die on the hill. We have some teachers that got in for the money. I'll die on that hill all day. And I'll be honest, I am struggling. I have so much rage, and I'm like ready to half cry because it pisses me off. I see these teachers hurting kids every day. They do exist. Are they a majority? Not even close. Most of our teachers are there, and a lot. It's a bell curve. It's like anything. We have a bell curve, and there are a lot of teachers in that middle, just in the machine, right? They're just trying to do the best I can. We do roll out for example, some of the tools, some things that majority of our teachers want. But we do see those fight. And the bad part is, it's the poison apple. It's the one that sits there, and that one really crappy teacher can kind of screw over a professional development where everyone's good, or that one nasty teacher, everyone's having a good conversation and trying to figure out this. And then the only thing they say are nasty, sour, rotten things. How do you have a collaborative, friendly environment when you have that one nasty human and you can't send them away? We struggle, and we find that a lot. And I know I'm not, again, bashing teachers as a whole, but there are those, and they are a really big problem. And it's a really hard problem to deal with. And until we can kind of excise that cancer, it's really difficult.
It's part of my thing when I say, we should go to larger class sizes, is you have a bunch of teachers that might be supporting that teacher, but there's only a handful of them that are actually interacting with the students directly, or presenting, and those ones are paid more, and they're much better at what they do, and they're much more, and they have to work really, really hard to get into that position. I think that allowing that, but the 15 to 1 or 30 to 1 or whatever never lets you do that. You just can't. You can't get that picky, because you just need too many. And I mean, you look at how much it takes. You watch professional football or professional baseball, and when you think about the farm team, which is every kid, not every, but a vast majority of children learning how to play that game from the time that they're 6 or 7 years old, and then only a very tiny fraction ending up up there. It takes a lot to get that level of capacity. Go ahead, Aaron.
So I'll start by saying I definitely did not go into teaching for the money whatsoever.
I don't think anybody here did. I
the
absolutely. The one thing that I think is a given is that nobody shows up on a Saturday to have a conversation about education who doesn't care about the kids. The thing is that, this is the kind of thing that happens for the people that, to Trevor's point before, is the people who are here obviously care. I think that's the representative. Anyway, go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, absolutely. And most of the teachers that I know are in the same boat with me. They're doing it 100% for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
even if they have different styles of teaching and things like that. But I think one of the biggest obstacles we have to overcome is the concept of standardized testing.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's where parents have to rise up.
Sorry, but testing would be a good place to get rid of.
Because the problem is that we're trying to teach all these kids at the same time. And I know in my classroom, I have students who in 3rd grade have a 5th grade knowledge base, and I have students who struggle with the concept of reading. And then all together, hopefully it doesn't happen this year, but we're kind of being forced to push them through this one door of a standardized test after we spent all this time creating new content and showing them new ways of doing things. And then they can't do that on the test. So I think that's something that really infuriates teachers that are spending their time, they're spending, weekends planning lessons, and they're finding videos, and they're trying to go above and beyond and really broaden their horizons, like have discussions and really get into the topics. And then all of a sudden, you have to try all these new things to get ready for the test. So I think if, that could go away, I think you would see a lot more teachers feel a lot more comfortable with teaching their topics and feel more themselves, just being able to share what they know, still having standards that they have to follow. But if we got rid of that super high risk testing, I think the teachers would feel calmer, the students would feel calmer. You could get so much more out of students just knowing that they don't have to compete for that final test. And I think that's the biggest hurdle why teachers burn out really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I hear Trevor loud and clear. One of the things that I had dealt with, the last time I was actually in the classroom was 2013, and I worked with. I was in a public school system, and I guess for me the other side of it was that, we talk about teachers spending money on materials and things like that, but what I sort of dealt with was teachers spending their own money to provide additional support for the students in terms of clothing, in terms of toiletries. There was a lot of extra stuff that, again, because of the pandemic, is not being dealt with. So those students that were getting some of those services from teachers are not getting them anymore. And the fact that they were having to get those services at school meant that they weren't getting them at home either.
Right.
And so that, for me, that's part of the hole that's there with virtual learning. But at the same time, I have to say that I'm an advocate for virtual learning and project-based learning, because I think that that is the most enriching way for students to learn. And again, that's my opinion.
Yep.
But also, I guess I'm concerned about the gap that is not being met anymore by the fact that teachers are not able to provide, and they shouldn't have to, but they were providing, support for children.
Right.
And it wasn't just a few teachers. It was a lot of the teachers that I knew and worked with that were doing those services and doing those things. And again, I know it wasn't, they shouldn't have to, but it was something that was needed, and it was something that they were doing.
Well, I think that when you're on a day-to-day interaction with another human being that has trouble and can't do it, it's hard to be a teacher and not do those things. And then it's hard to stay positive when that's not being handled. So I think those are I think a lot of the challenges that teachers have. We got a couple more questions. We're running heavy, but I don't mind. It's Saturday. Oh, Emily, did you have something before we jump on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think, there's been a little bit of conversation in Mukana about leadership, and I think that that's really important too, because I've worked under several different administrations, and when you have a supportive administration who's holding you accountable, who's showing up to do the drive-bys, who is, saying, I came into your class and the kids didn't look like they were getting, and you didn't check, and you didn't do this, or how were you assessing whether you were doing this or that? Those administrators are bringing you forward, and they're not afraid to go after the teachers who are protected by the union or protected by their tenure or any of that stuff. They go in and they're like, look, this is what I saw. I want to know how you're going to do better. I've also seen that same system under a different administration in the same district go completely the other way, where a principal who was not only negligent and an alcoholic and instigated fights with students in the hallways in order to get them suspended intentionally. There's someone who is hurting people, given the ability to walk away. Like, you're going to resign once they got to a certain point, once the person went past a certain line, but all the damage that was done the 2 years prior to that and was protected, and now that person gets to walk and go into another district and inflict that same pain. I completely agree with Trevor in the sense of this. There has to be a reckoning with how we evaluate and how we decide who gets to say, and what is that level of, you're being negligent with your students and their learning, and, with what you need to do to be part of this administration or this district. And so this is the steps that you need to follow. And if you don't follow them, there will be consequences. Instead, there are some teachers that I work with every day who go, until they tell me I have to do it, and the union's not going to tell me I have to do it, I'm not going to do it. And, it doesn't mean that they don't care about their kids, but they also don't have this holistic view that may have been crushed by a previous administration or leadership, or, coming into the system with grand ideas. I went into the system with grand ideas of, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to make these kids great, and they're going to love me, and the school is going to be awesome. And my first year, I cried every day in my class. I don't cry. I do not cry. I was in my classroom crying every day because kids were disrespectful and my colleagues weren't helping me. And I had an alcoholic principal who was notoriously just terrible to people, and made that you were liked or you weren't liked. And if you weren't liked, your life was miserable. And so I think, there are people who go into it with great intentions and want to do and want to grow and want to be better. And then, 3 years in, you've got your tenure, and then 10 years in, you're vested in the system, and it's miserable, but you keep going because you do love those kids. And there are interactions every day that are great. But there are some people that have just punching that clock now, because they're just like, no matter what I do, if I do better, if I do worse, nobody cares and no one can stop me. So I'm just going to come in and do what I need to do to get through the day. And that's sad. It's horrible to see. And I don't think any of those people went in with that intention. And I don't think that.
Well, I don't think that people want to live that way. I don't think people generally want to live that way. They don't want to have a life where that work is work and it just pays the bills. I think that
But
they
I've
get
had
caught up
teachers
in.
tell me I'm going to retire at $150,000. I just have to put in 7 more years. I'm not doing any of that technology stuff you told me I have to do. And I'm not doing anything else other than what I've been doing for the last 28 years. And
Right.
if that's the person's attitude, like, how are they hurting those kids? Because the
Yep.
kids before them and the kids after them are learning those skills. So, I mean, there is stuff in the system that needs to be addressed, and the way that we evaluate teachers. When a teacher does an evaluation, and I'm not saying this is in every district, but in my district, when I was evaluated, I was given notification 72 hours before the person came into my classroom. In 72 hours, I can make my classroom look freaking amazing. I can make the best lesson plan ever and put it in front of my kids, get graded on that, and then do nothing for the rest of the year. And if no one comes to check on me, no one's going to know any better, because they're giving you notification. They changed that system, and then they did 10 drive-bys per year for 10 minutes. So an administrator could walk into your classroom at any time, 10 times a year for 10 minutes. And that did more to improve the way that we taught than the previous system. So maybe some of the systems do need to be reevaluated in the way that we qualify teachers.
And I definitely agree with you that it comes from the top. I mean, the school my kids were in California, a grade school, was like blue ribbon, whatever. I don't know how many blue ribbons, but they were all the way down the wall. And I can tell you that the principal kind of scared me to the level of how controlling she was about everything. Like, I was like, wow, that would be, that'd be that's a complicated person. And, but I softened up, because it was just, you were clear that she was paying attention to every little detail, and she was honing something. She was solving an unsolvable problem internally that she was trying to figure out. And, and the teachers all were too, like the teachers that she got there and who they were all trying to do that. But it was a smaller school, and, everyone was paid. To Trevor's point, I think that the entry level at that school is like $150,000 a year. It's not like, we're not talking, getting paid what normal teachers get paid. I mean, in Marin, that's not that much, but it's still a lot, no matter what, no matter how you cut it. And they're not struggling in that sense. So it was a different situation. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, moving on to James Baldwin here in San Diego. Would the M1 MacBook Pro with 8 gigabytes of memory and a 512 gigabyte SSD storage be adequate for Zoom meetings, or would you choose 16 gigs and a 1 terabyte SSD?
I've already done, 100 Zoom meetings with an M1, 8 gigs. If that's all you're doing, absolutely works perfectly. Works better than the Intel version. Like, it is stunningly good for that given thing. And I'm buying 4 for my little system here, 4 of the M1s, 8 gigs, because I don't want to pay for the 16, because I'm just having them be glue. But really, really, really powerful. Tony?
I have one. I'm extremely happy with it. Extremely happy with it. I would say that if it's in your budget to get the 16, get the 16. But the 8 does more than what I need. I mean, it's fantastic.
It's just screaming fast.
It makes my 2012 seem like a piece of junk. And my 2012, even though it's 8 years old, is better than a whole lot of Windows machine. I'm just gonna say that. And
it makes I'm gonna put a perspective. It makes my 2020 iMac feel sluggish. Like that's what the Mac Minis. Go ahead, Tony.
And the only thing I would add is, if it's in your budget to get the 16, get the 16. Mm-hmm. I think that the 8 is going to serve me well. I hope that at the time in which the 8 does not serve me as well, I will have gotten the new M whatever that is the new MacBook when that comes out.
I mean, fundamentally, this gets back into the Mac discussion, but until the Intel world figures out a way to do what Apple did, they're just going to keep on falling further behind performance-wise. There's no way to, with it all on the chip, there's no way to compete with that. Like, and Apple spent a decade working on that, you know, and it would take a decade to catch up. You know, like, it's not like it is a brutal, it's the scariest, most disruptive thing that's happened in computing since I don't know when. Like, literally, the last time I can remember something shifting so fast was with the larger L2 cache and the G3 chip. You know, like, that was done almost by accident, you know, and where suddenly we just had something that was way faster than what we expected. And the M1 chip, and as Apple rolls out the M2, the M1X, the M2, M3, M4, by the M4, there won't be anything on. I don't believe, with the rumors that are bouncing around, I don't believe there'll be any personal computer as fast as the Macs at that point. And again, PCs can catch up, but they have to do the same thing. They have to get the chip and the memory and everything else. And it'll take them, I believe, 5 to 10 years for other manufacturers to get there. And at that point, Apple will just keep on spreading out the distance. So it's, you know, that's going to be a really big challenge for everyone in that area. And there'll still be people who stick with PCs because they're easier to manage, but performance-wise, it's going to be a real difficult situation. Go ahead, Bill.
I think there's an expectation drag that I have found that happens in technology, particularly for media production, because that's what I do every day. And for a long time, it used to be if you didn't configure your tower computer perfectly with the right card and the right this and the right memory and this much, it wouldn't work. And you'd have a struggle to get video or something like that out the door. Over the course of time, and it happened for me the first time I got a particular MacBook, people were always telling me, you cannot do professional work on a laptop. You just can't do it. You need this and that. And I got one because of an accident, and I started doing work, and I thought, well, this is actually easy. I'm able to get my normal work out that I used to do on a tower on a laptop efficiently. And so why are you keep saying that? And over for the next 5 to 8 years, I kept hearing this, you have to have these things to succeed. And I wasn't experiencing any of that. And with this leap to the M1 chips that everybody's talking about, I think even the generation before that, they're incredibly competent, even on the laptop and the desktops. If you need to do basic video, no, not 8K, but if you need to do basic video and put something on a screen, you've been able to do that decently for the last couple of generations of laptops or desktops, and probably phones as well. It is not as convenient as having the bespoke tools, but you can do it. Now with this M1, I just think those questions ought to dissolve away. And if you're worried about, will the difference between 512 and 1 gig of SSD, it's going to make a difference at one particular area if you're doing a lot of work and you have to manage multiple projects. But the basic machine can do everything that you could possibly want to do.
It's pretty nifty.
Don't worry about it.
Yep, next question.
Moving on to Andy Carluccio, who asks from Washington, D.C., an alumni organization asked my company to come and advise on renovations on a space for student media productions in my old high school. I have my short list, but what are the panel's ideas for hardware and software workflows for students just getting started in AV?
And Andy, do you have a rough budget?
Yeah, I think they're well, you know what? I actually don't, because of the latest bill that's going through. I actually don't know if that's going to get disrupted. But basically, they approached us and said, we want to take this money and invest it in infrastructure. What should we do on the AV side? My first response was, well, let's talk about curricular goals first, because that that needs to precede these purchases, because they have to work together. But they seem to have beginning that in line, and now they're what they're currently doing is they're just throwing a bunch of spare AV equipment on a table and saying, hey, play around with this camcorder from 2008. Is it Premiere? Is it what is that entry point for that student?
Well, entry point and where they go, I think, would be a distinct thing. I'll say a couple things about it. I mean, someone who builds a lot of platforms, the Blackmagic /Mac solution is lethal. Like it is like you can't keep up with any system that combines those two pieces. So what I would say is that I still think that students will produce more faster on the Apple tool set. The Final Cut, Logic, Compressor, Motion. I wouldn't bother with Premiere or any of the Adobe products for anyone starting new. If you already use those, it makes a lot of sense. Go ahead. I wouldn't teach anybody those. Like those are what I would consider, past conversations, especially when you pay $199 once for every computer. And technically, if it's the same user across all those computers, Apple doesn't care. As far as they're concerned, you bought the hardware. They really don't care. So, I've had lots of conversations about that. And so they literally don't care at all. So you pay $199, you put it on all the things, you have all those things, they can go faster. If I was going to step up from that for technical production, just so that they learn how to do those things, I would say Resolve makes sense. But I don't think that there's any, again, when I look at long-term trajectory of everybody that I know, everybody is going towards Resolve or Final Cut. They're not, like, there's a whole bunch of people that are stuck in Hollywood that still use Premiere and Avids, but that's not what I see in a trajectory. Again, and I'm not talking about trajectory in TV and film. I'm talking about trajectory in media production for corporate, for, all these things. We want to look at this puzzle much larger than TV and film, because who's going to even know what TV and film is in 5 years? Like the transition is happening so quickly. So we want to look at general process. The ability to get something done quicker is there. Now, the reason that Blackmagic makes sense is just because it's an ecosystem. You have to decide whether you're doing an SDI ecosystem or a HDMI ecosystem, but it's an ecosystem. The cameras talk to the switchers. And to your point, especially given that they're talking to you about it, the ability to automate Blackmagic and to build subsystems that let you do it is just way higher than everything else. Like, the reason that we got into Blackmagic is because I can write code. Like, I have when this all goes back together, I have a touch screen and I have a telestrator, and they all talk to the switcher. Like they're interacting with the switcher, and I can't. When I run larger classes in that, I'm about to run some classes on media production. I couldn't run them on anything else because my tools are all talking directly to the switcher, and interacting with it, and so on and so forth. And so the thing is that interaction back and forth is super powerful. I think that that would be my recommendation, is to strongly think about those two patterns. I do think that I will say that the hard part is that I really wish there was a better SDI solution for the Blackmagic stuff, just because, or go to 2110 or whatever. The HDMI is very limited in the length of cables, and it becomes complicated to deal with. An HDMI is kind of a horrible format. But I will say that the 6K camera, the Blackmagic 6K camera, I've owned probably 30 different cameras, and the cheapest being, $50, and the most expensive being $250,000. So $250,000 is my F950 is a $250,000 camera. The 6K Blackmagic 6K is the most pleasurable camera to use that I've ever used. Like, it is just fun. Like, and there's so much power, like the touch screen and the LUTs and all the other things, and they're all right at your fingertips, and you can have a little controller on your Mac that just runs it, or your iPad that controls all the things, and it does all, and it ties into the little switcher. And it's kind of like, if I was going to teach students, I would absolutely go with 6K cameras I would use 6K cameras for acquisition, and I would use a mini, maybe an ISO, so that I'd be able, the A10 mini ISOs. Like, they could produce incredible work with those things. And if you build a larger system, then maybe you get Ursas and something else. If you really had the money, maybe you get something bigger. So they have like the big studio, but then you have a whole bunch of little studios. And the other thing is that you can take those little 6Ks out and go do little shoots and interviews, and they
go in the field. Yeah,
amazing. And so, like, and as someone who's done this for a long time, the idea that I could be in high school using a 6K, especially if you teach them how to take full advantage of it, take advantage of the LUTs and learn how to do color correction and learn how to do, I think that, and Benjamin will hopefully either underline or undermine my argument that it's fun to work at a high end, especially when it's affordable. So anyway, go ahead, Benjamin, and then John.
Just real quick, I primarily work in a space at my school where quality has not been the priority. Quantity has been. So we've bought a absolute monstrous amount of gear. Keep in mind, we're primarily in a theater setting, 40-foot proscenium, 450-seat house. So think about like lights and audio equipment. We've been buying a lot of lights that are very inexpensive. So looking at the absolute cheapest thing in order to have the most of them. And in a very weird way, a little different thing, it provides an incredible learning opportunity to make good use of bad things. And I totally believe in Alex's argument. I wish I worked in a space like that. But if you're gonna split right down the middle, there's an argument to be made to having a lot of kind of crummy stuff, because with enough students interested, they can spend a lot of time making really great enhancements to really crummy gear. And
That's
you know,
exactly
whether that's
how I
soldering
learned
practice.
too. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think
soldering
exactly
practice.
that,
Or, it's like
a lot of us do, but I think that the only thing I'll say is that if for instance, the other thing I would highly suggest if you get the 6K cameras is download or find somebody or text me and get a hold of the Netflix standards guide, which I believe is available somewhere publicly. But there's a thing that's floating around that's the Netflix standard guide, which basically runs the whole industry now. Everybody uses that standards guide, but I just feel like there's an opportunity for kids. I get frustrated that kids do get like the little stuff, and then there's never been a chance when you could give kids something they could do something that is at the same level as TV, and like, or better, and the thing, and I just know that as a student, when I was growing up, I mean, a lot of it, we got excited to be able to do some video. I just know that if someone gave me those tools to use, I would be there every waking minute. I'd be studying, how to take full advantage of that, and how to stretch that out. Because it's not that you won't, Benjamin's correct that you learn a bunch of things about improvisation that is really great. But what if you could just spend all that time learning how to like take it to the nth level?
Right. You need to learn how to think, but you also need to learn the tools and be able to grow. Right.
Yeah. I mean, and there are things. Yeah. Like I had a problem where we trained everybody how to shoot green screen so well that if you gave them a bad green screen, they didn't know what to do with it. They were like, I don't know what to do with this, because they didn't know how to do a bad green screen, because what they knew how to do really well was light a green screen. Like they knew everybody that I trained would light perfect green screens. And so if you gave them like one that was rough, they'd be like, these people are crazy. Why are we even having this conversation? Anyway, go ahead, John, and then Bill. And then
sort of a blend of what you said, Alex. I agree with you, but Benjamin, it's right. You need to have a quantity enough of them, but it doesn't have to be bad equipment. I think a game changer is this app called Cinemaker that lets you take an iPad as a switcher and 4 iPhones. So literally you have a crew. If you have a class of 24 students, you got 5 production teams, and they could start producing it. They could learn all the steps they need to know. And it's not hard to come up with 4 iPhones and an iPad. And their new version, which is the Cinemaker Director, this switcher and the iPhones become an input directly into Zoom. So they become a broadcast station. So now you've got a 4-camera shoot with green screen, with lower thirds, with audio, and you could broadcast it immediately. But even cooler, if you record onto your iPhones, as soon as your live stream is done, you can offload the video from the cameras on the phone, and it goes into a timeline in Final Cut, and you can recut it.
And I believe that runs on iPod touches as well. I mean, you could really go into something where you had smaller. You don't have to use a cell phone.
I use the iPad touches. It does 4 videos in, but it does 8 audio. So I use the iPhone touches as wireless microphones. Right. And a lot of schools have a lot of those around.
But yeah, I think that there is a blend where that's the small version, and I think that any good media production at this point would include phone production. I think that understanding how to produce good content on a phone, especially now that the phones capture in vision, capturing on a phone, I think is I would agree with John and with Benjamin. I think in the same way that like phone production is something that I would probably start with, because a lot of people are playing with TikTok and YouTube and everything else. But then having another piece of it being like really high end hardware, I think would be exciting for the students. That's all. Bill, and then
it's a big jump to go from just a single phone to get them to go to a switcher and whatever, but getting them through the Cinemaker that moves them to multi-camera shooting, which.
Yep. But I could see a progression of go out and shoot films with your iPhone, go out and do multicam with a still iPad, then go out and start shooting some of that stuff with 6K, and then doing multicam with 6K. And the thing is, if you did that where students started as a freshman and got out the other end with that skill set,
And that's the beauty of the program. Is I looked at the curriculum, and that's exactly what it is. In fact, they want to build the way that they're doing this building is each floor. It's you get towards up, like literally in the infrastructure of the building. It is designed to mesh with the curriculum really well, and in that progression. So we're super excited about that.
I'll tell you one other skill set that I wish I had incorporated more of in myself, but that comes from theater. But the ability to build flats. So carpentry is super powerful. Drywall is not expensive. Wood is not expensive. And there was a behind the scenes that Zach King put up where you see the power of him just building a handful of flats. And you can reuse them all the time, but it shows him he did how to Christmify or whatever a room, and he takes a snow globe and he opens the door and he throws it in and he shuts the door for a second. And then he opens it, and maybe someone can grab it because it's incredible to watch. But he opens it up, and it's like there's snow everywhere, and it's like, but to you it looks like it just happened, right? And then he showed the behind the scenes with above and below, and what he did was he's on a roller. The whole room, the door front is on a rolling thing. So what happens is that the camera stays stable. So he opens it up into one room, throws it in, closes it. And then they move the whole door, they move the door, that one flat, all the way over, and he opens the door up again, and it's already been preset, and it's got all the stuff in it, and it's all done in camera, and the thing is, but when I saw that, I was like, and my kids have learned more about video production from Zach King than almost anybody else because Apple paid him some insane amount of money to build how-tos on, that you could get at the Apple Store for free. And my kids have learned so many weird little tips and tricks from him. Anyway, but flat production, super useful skill. Go ahead, Bill, and then Mickey.
Andy, for me in the course of my career, the tension has always been in everything I've seen in every organization I've worked with between compatibility and innovation. Those two constituencies are relative. And I've heard lots of people say you should teach everybody Avid because Avid's with the industry. That's a compatibility argument, and it's fair and it has its place. The innovation argument is, but there's better ways now. There are better tools now. The chips are faster. We don't have to go back to using older software that was designed around a set of skill sets from 15 years ago and keep going that way. Every time I have elected to stay with compatibility, I feel like I've been dragged slower. And every time I move towards innovation in something that I saw that if this works out, it's going to really increase my throughput, my ease, my enjoyment of doing things, particularly the enjoyment factor of feeling like I'm moving forward through the industry rather than being held back. It's been inspirational to me as an individual. And so all those tools that I look back on, those are the ones that excite me. So I would move myself in the direction of things that innovate rather than the direction of things that maintain the status quo. Again, I'm not saying that's bad. And for somebody who wants to work, if the biggest shops in your town are all premier editors and your goal is to get a job as a seat in somebody else's shop in that premier editing world, you need to learn that. I get that.
It's just the issue is that the media industry is about to blow up.
It's moving
blowing
so
up
fast.
It's blowing up, and the thing is that you won't be able to sell a product without media. You won't be able to support a product without media. You won't be able to move forward the companies without media. The thing is that it's far more important for people to understand how to make media for their forward-thinking jobs. Teachers right now have to figure out how to do media, but in companies, I have friends and relatives who have progressed through their company really fast because they know how to make videos. Because they would make videos about things that they wanted to do, and it would sell people on the idea. So, I think that media production is as important as reading, writing, and arithmetic. But I don't think that Premiere and
A young person can reach in their pocket, pull out their phone, make a piece of content, and the next day that sparkles has a better future right now.
But what I'll say is that I'm pretty good at trajectories. Like I just look at overall trajectories, and you can look at ones that are flat, like that are of a flat trajectory and an upward trajectory. And I can just tell you that the upward trajectory is with Final Cut and DaVinci, and the flat trajectories or even reducing trajectories are Avid and Premiere. And they'll be around for a decade at least, but there's no future there. Like there's not really any other than just being compatible. They're not gonna, I've just made sure that I'll never get a job at Adobe or Avid. Anyway, Mickey.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that the specs for Netflix are available online, and they change like once or twice a year. So keep on checking them every now and then because they keep on pushing the boundaries.
But they think about it a lot. Like I know the guys that actually work on that spec sheet, and those guys are like smartest guys in the industry, smartest guys in the world when it comes to media. And they're making decisions, and when they make those decisions, I mean, I think Mickey can underline. They're generally, most of them are very right.
Yeah, I agree, especially with loudness. I hate the loudness wars. And I just wanted to mention, like, in terms of the like hardware, say if you end up being on a tighter budget than expected, I would suggest don't skimp on monitoring, be it audio monitoring or like visual monitoring for picture, because you want the students to be able to accurately compare like professional work versus their work and see how they can progress towards that. Because if they can't tell the difference, see or hear the difference, then they might not have they might not have the drive to like push for something of better quality.
There's also I'll say something dangerous, but it is true most of the time, is that there is a advantage as an individual school if you can get away with it to do things that are outrageous, that don't necessarily cost a ton of money. But so the kind of thing that I would try to do right now is I would build one little studio that is for the best students that's there, that has 10 discrete speakers, and you can finish in Vision and Atmos. And the reason that I would do that is because you'll be one of the only high schools in the United States, and you will get articles written about you, and you'll get, and companies will, and that begets more money. So the thing is I have used this tool of doing something outrageous over and over again, and so you put a bunch of money into the wide area, and there's this sense that you want to play, we shouldn't spend that extra, but like that room will cost you $15,000. Like it's not like it's a huge number compared to whatever you're getting. I mean, if all you have is $15,000, then that's a lot to spend on a room. But if you have a $250,000 budget, that $15,000 will get you another $250,000 budget. Because it makes the administrator look good, it makes the teachers look good, it makes the students look good. You get things that and those are the kind of things of like playing hard in one little area that suddenly spikes up, gets everybody's attention. That's why Richard Branson. That's how he built his company. And I learned it from Richard Branson, is to do crazy things, and spend a small amount of money to do something crazy. So I wouldn't do that, make 10 of those rooms, but having a room that's capable of doing that will get you press and get you interest and get a bunch of things. And people will want their kids to go there. There'll be people that want kids to go there because that one room exists. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, look at all the publicity Full Sail gets for their SSL room, and also like Blackbird Studios for their one like amazing room, but everything else is like But the Atmos studio with the diffusion and the walls that look like wooden spikes, like amazing. I just wanted to add as well, like network infrastructure. Everything's going IP, so you mentioned several floors in the facility, multiple 40 gigabit trunks between the floors, just because everything is going IP. And of course, you know all about that, Andy.
Yeah, and I would just say TAC 12 between every room. TAC 12 to every room minimum. It just takes away, it future proofs you for a century, because we'll just keep on getting better at glass, and 12 strands of glass will take you a long way. You put 8 cameras. You can put 8 cameras on one piece. So anyway, next question. It's good question.
Big conduit between everything. Ken Kersey asks next. Alex talks about the years of experience in the regular panel. How many years of experience are represented by the education panel?
For those willing to talk about when they, and I would say from the time they first did something professional in education. So that's what they got paid to do something in education. If you want, you can pass if you want to, but otherwise, let us know how many years you've done this, Aaron. Someone's got to write it down because I'm not going to know. I'm not going to be able to. Aaron, how many years?
10 years.
10 years. Tony?
13 years.
13 years. Chris?
45 years.
Woo, we got a big one. Emily?
14 years.
Benjamin?
You
haven't paid for it yet. He hasn't paid for it yet.
I've been paid. I've been paid
Okay,
over
there
the
you go.
summer.
Okay, we'll give you 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. 4 years. Andy?
I think this would be my first year in professional work. I just graduated college myself. So
okay, very cool. John?
First year since professional pay, 52.
There you go. Bill?
I haven't really worked in education, but I've been doing this for about 35 years now.
Okay. Mickey?
Would workshops count?
Yeah.
I guess 6 years.
Okay, good. Steve?
13 in higher education and probably doing seminars and other forms of education, probably 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm. So 20, we'll say 35 years. Brian?
About 15 years full-time in adult education, e-learning development, and a good 5 before that, off and on with different things.
So 20 years. Guy?
Yeah, 20 years ago, I was teaching Final Cut Pro and kept on going.
Nice, 20. And then Trevor?
10 years, all K-12.
And from the first time I started doing training, it would be 29 years. You know, since my first one was 1991. So Bill, did anyone ratchet that up? Did anyone get?
I started, but I didn't think you were coming to me because I'm not an official teacher.
Benjamin figured it out. 300 years. So we
approximately. We're rounding up a little bit.
Rounding up a little bit. Okay, 250 to 300 years of experience in this relatively small panel. So that's a lot of thinking power. It's good question. Good question. Next question.
Moving on to Paul Wallace has an EDU question. Is there any way to repurpose an iMac 27-inch as a display only for the new M1 chips Macs?
I think you can, for some reason, I think you can AirPlay it, but I think that would be really hard. I think that would be hard to get a good performance out of. Go ahead, Andy, and then Mickey.
Are you willing to tear it apart?
Yeah, there you go.
My next question.
Hardwired to the monitor bus.
Yeah, we can make that work, Mickey.
Yeah, I recall like the previous models, you're able to do target display mode, but I forgot until what year that was possible.
Yeah, they stopped doing that. Next question.
Moving on to Greg Kurta of Steinger, Norway, and a friend of ours who's usually here. Are teachers and courses evaluated by the students, and does management look at those and have any power to make changes?
Is there any 360 review? No. That'd probably be against the union rules. John?
Well, in higher education, there are...
a bunch of people don't want to talk about like...
No, in higher education, there are student evaluations usually formally done at the end of the term.
Mm-hmm.
There's also peer evaluation. Excuse me. This is all through the tenure process. So throughout, you'll have another faculty member come in and review a class. Then there'll be student evaluations. There's a lot of discussion about this. Student evaluations are not very good measures of teaching quality. But anyway, there in higher ed, there is an evaluation process.
Good, Benjamin.
I come from a unique private high school, and at the end of every semester, we have teacher evaluation forums that are reviewed by department heads. And additionally, for new teachers, it's every quarter or until they are satisfied with their performance. And for people who have consistently received poor evaluations, they have to do them every quarter as well.
Wow. That's good. All right, Emily?
It was not required in public education in any building I've worked in to get any feedback from the students, nor was it taken into consideration. However, after that first year of tiers, I did ask the kids at the end of each semester what I did well, what I didn't do well, what I needed to take into consideration. And I still have those in a folder from those first 2 years that I did it from those kids. And I whip it out, and the way that I grew from just getting that feedback from the kids, whether it was like, just, you have to take into consideration, like, I work jobs and you want me to do this much reading a night and I can't do that. And like that kind of feedback at a personal level. And then just the stuff that was like, you made us do this and I don't really see the point in doing that. And, if you explained it better or maybe thought about not doing that in the future, that might be better. And all that stuff changed the way that I worked with my kids in my classroom and changed the way I viewed. And so I always had the kids giving me feedback from that point on. But that first year I kept those and I go back to them because the difference from that year to where I am now and how I work with kids is completely different.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Chris?
I had a clever idea many years ago, probably my last clever idea, but that was to use the required end of course evaluation for a university teacher education course at midterm. So I had all the students fill out the evaluation of teaching, including writing a letter to me on the back of the document, the form that the university required. And then I summarized all of those and made graphs and slides, and I went over the feedback with the students at our next meeting. And we all learned what we liked, what we didn't like, and that there were contradictory advice given to the instructor about do more of this, and others are saying do less of this. So because these were prospective teachers, I wanted them to see the range of responses and reactions and suggestions that students might have when you can't please everyone because there are contradictions in the advice you get. So what's a teacher to do? Right. Needless to say, perhaps my end of course evaluation, and we did make some changes in response to the suggestions. The end of course evaluations were the best I'd ever had, because these students were sure that I was taking their input seriously.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. John?
I was going to say, you found out the trick, Chris. I was junior faculty who I advised. Teaching evaluations was part of the tenure process. So you wanted to get the best scores you could get. And it might be considered manipulation, but if I've got a faculty member who'd be willing to give a midterm student evaluation form very similar to the one that the university gave at the end and actually do something with it, their scores went up anywhere between 15 to 25%.
Right. That's great. Benjamin?
Just real quick, not being a teacher myself, but knowing, and I know there's one administrator at my school who's famously told the senior leadership team, don't survey what you don't want to change or don't have any intention of changing. And I think that really rings true for teacher suggestions. If teachers don't want to ask the questions you actually want feedback on, and don't ask the questions you're not going to change anything on, because then you'll set up that expectation that something's going to happen. And my school has a reputation among the student body for endless surveys, and that's really shaped the changing philosophy there. Is we survey everything from students who we want to change, and anything we don't want to change, we just don't ask. At least I really wish we did. That's the goal. It's the gold standard in my mind.
The funny thing, there was a thing called the Ideas platform that Salesforce. It was actually the seed of what I think what you see now is a Mukana. Now Salesforce took it from Dig and they created their own, but they had created a platform. So the very first version of what became Mukana was built on top of the Ideas platform, but it was hidden by the time I even used it. I only knew about it because we did tons of work for Salesforce and it was like a thing they promoted for a little while. But what killed it was the fact that if you let your employees or the public suggest change and then vote on it, you get answers that you didn't like, and so when people said what you don't like about Starbucks, then a whole bunch of people, and then the problem is when everyone votes on it, you all know that you all don't like it, now everyone, it's not just that, that you're ignoring a lot of people. So like, for instance, and the thing that killed the Ideas platform literally in 1 month is in 2008, Barack Obama said, when I become president, in 2007 or 2008, I guess, early 2008, Barack Obama said, when I become president, what should be the first thing that I should do? And the number one voted by a lot in the Ideas platform, because Salesforce got into it, we'll get a candidate to do it and everything else, by a lot, was legalize marijuana. So that just shot straight to the top, and it was just it was the reigning whatever, and the politicians were like, no, I don't want to ask those questions. To get to your point, they were like, no, I don't want to ask questions that I don't want to do. What was interesting about it was that nothing was legal in 2008. I think, there was almost nothing legal. So it did tell you a trend that was going to go that direction, even though it was way before it was okay to go that direction. Because you could just tell there was a groundswell of people that were tired of that process. Anyway, it's just an interesting. Go ahead, Benjamin.
One very last point is that petition system that during the Obama era, they started petitions.whitehouse.gov. I highly encourage anyone who's interested to go check it out. It's a mix between absolute hilarity, as in it's clearly been passed around through many different communities, and it seems to be a rallying point for some folks. But at one point, it had let's just say policies completely contrary to the Trump administration's agenda, of course, getting voted on enough that they were required by law to then provide a response, which of course they really did not want to do. And that happened in the Obama administration as well. But, without getting too much into politics, it's hilarious to see what people really want and what they're eager to vote on.
Yep. Last question.
Craig Hibbard has the honor of the last question of today's session. It's a shame at how much money going into education this year is going to be simplistic, easy to explain solutions, plexiglass barriers, some hardware, a piece of software, and so forth. How can you reach the decision makers and get those nuanced solutions built around teachers' wants, I would assume?
No one knows that answer. The one thing I will say that goes contrary to some of the stuff I've talked about as far as centralizing, knowledge distribution and everything else, is that if we look at nature, what I will say is if we look at nature, what we look at is across the whole world is we look at an agile development system that kind of reacts to its own location. And you end up with there's ant species that only exist on one tree, and there's other things that exist, that they've adapted to that environment. And so I do think that I've been kind of thinking through it like water, certain minerals, other things are generalized, right? Those are general, because I always look at how does the world tell us how the world has been spending a couple billion years, not $1 billion. The world has spent a couple billion years figuring this out, right? Or however you want to define that, the figuring out the best way to do this. And it's pretty responsive. And so if you look at it for clues on how to actually do things, it's pretty good at, there's generalized things that everything needs, like water and minerals and stone and other things. And then everything else kind of customizes, to where it's at and what it does and how it works. And it evolves, and it's not all perfect. It breaks and it doesn't work, and there's a whole bunch of things that don't work, and then suddenly things don't work. But then they all kind of even out when they're allowed to just continue to, randomly interact or maybe semi-randomly interact. And so it's just I think that as we think of schools, we may want to think about we do want generalized things. Like I think of things that need to be more available to everyone. But then I think that letting schools and administrations and even classrooms customize themselves, more than they do now. I think it's the generalized testing and everything else that makes it difficult, to figure that out. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, that's a very hard question to answer because schools are so fragmented in how they work. From a general, there's a few ideas. So for a small district, we're a smaller district. Every employee in our district, teachers down to a 2-hour campus aide, has my cell phone number and has our superintendent's cell phone number. Our emails, once the pandemic started, we actually started doing a weekly survey. And it's literally, how did it go? what's your feedback? And we actually read those and go through them. Bigger districts, you might still have some people in management. It might be your principal or that you can reach out to and have conversations. If it's a real contentious district, and I am admin, but I'll be the first to say, having worked with many administrators throughout other districts, there's a lot of really bad admin too. So it's not just teachers I get frustrated with. There's a lot of admin too that are kind of just doing their own thing. But if you have a decent administrator, talk to them. If you don't, and you are in a union, you can have those conversations. So it kind of depends how the negotiations work in the districts. But for us, we have pretty good relationships. When we sit down with our union leadership, be it negotiations or not, sometimes say, hey, a lot of teachers are bringing up this. I go, okay, cool. And it's not something we necessarily negotiate that day, but it's something we know, and we know to start looking into it or try and address it. Or there's a lot of avenues to try, and especially if there's a lot of you. I mean, that is one perk of a union. If a lot of you go to, say, one of your union meetings and say, hey, we want a headset or, whatever basic thing, it's at least a shot at trying to get that into someone's mind.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think, Alex, what you just said is an example of thinking ecologically about education. And my very first graduate course while I was still in the Navy was on ecology, which was a new idea at that scale in 1964. And there's great power in thinking ecologically about these systems. What we've created, what we humans have created, are larger and larger systems that we try to control from a distance. A lot of the problems of testing, it's manifested there, and in many other regulations and so-called economies of scale, actually violate some of the fundamental principles of a balanced ecosystem, or think about a balanced aquarium. What we really should be rethinking is how, as you said, Alex, how nature has made things work, although there are merciless qualities to living in an ecosystem that crashes and burns, or burns first and then crashes. So there are limits to it as well, or challenges to some of our ideals and principles. But basically, biological ecosystems make a lot of sense as a better model than the hyper-rational models of systems design, systems thinking that we're also in love with.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily?
If you guys haven't seen it before, I'd highly recommend looking into Brockton High School in Massachusetts. They did a turnaround that came from the teachers up. They served a community that was very diverse. There were like 64 languages spoken in the high school. The high school was siloed. It's 4 separate buildings, and the teachers were really siloed in their buildings and weren't working together. But a group of teachers came together and met on the weekends outside of school, not under any direction from the administration, and looked at what they were going to do to turn it around. And when I toured their school, I think it was in like 2010 or 2011, we went there with our district to kind of look and see what they did that we could bring back to our district. One of the things that was really interesting and cool was that every administrator had to teach at least one course. So whether they were teaching an executive, skills course, or they were doing something from their previous life, whether they were an EL teacher, math, science, whatever, they had one class they had to teach every semester. And what that did is it kept them from separating themselves from the reality of what it is to be in the classroom. And I think if we required that in all of our schools, gave that time, and I know administrators do 9 bajillion things and I don't want that job. But if we were able to get them back into the classroom, even just if it was like, a simple class that they were going to teach to kids once a year, they would have a better understanding of what people need, what their teachers need, what their building is like, what their actual culture is like inside at a granular level. And I think that they would think more about the solutions that are needed, as opposed to the influx and push from the community, from the parents, from the state or the federal government about what they need to do. And they'd be able to look at it more at a granular level and say, this is what we need for us in our situation.
That's great.
So
it's always, I mean, the thing is, especially with new technologies and new things moving, it's really hard to replace just doing it. I still do enough. I know that I learned this from John Knoll. John Knoll wrote, he and his brother wrote Photoshop, but he was a visual effects supervisor at ILM. He has never stopped doing shots. Like he's always like, even though he's probably, other than being an executive, which is something he wouldn't want to do at ILM, he's the creative director at ILM. That's mostly like, hey, we're just going to give John, we're just going to try to keep John here, like keep him from he doesn't need the money. He wrote Photoshop. Helped write Photoshop. And so he doesn't need the money. He just does it because it's fun. But he always keeps doing shots because it keeps his sword sharp. He's always working on shots. Now, sometimes when he worked on shots, for instance, when he was visual effects supervisor for Star Wars Episode 1, he did all the space shots in his house with an 840 AV, just for fun. But he built, like in Mandalorian, he built the entire the motion control rig, or he and a couple other guys that I know. I mean, I wouldn't. He would tell you it's not all him. But the point is that he constantly is working on that and constantly thinking about how to make it better, even though he's in a management position where there's no requirement for him to do that. But he keeps on getting better because he keeps on doing it. And I keep on doing production. I mean, I love teaching, but I would never give up production. Like I would never stop producing because I'm afraid that I wouldn't be able to teach it. Like I wouldn't be able to teach production if I wasn't doing it. Go ahead, John.
A blog from John Morrow, which he just did it last week, but it's been dealing with these issues. And he had one quote in there: "If my students aren't learning, then I'm not teaching," has a whole discussion of that. Another quote in his blog is, "When most students are not learning, then the system itself is broken and must be examined from the ground up." And then he goes on to, the title of this blog is "Going Back to School, Now What?" And it's addressing the issue we've been talking about all morning. But John was the education reporter for NewsHour. I think he retired about 10 years ago and did a book on educational reform. But if you want to continue this thought track of what's going to happen when we go back, John Morrow and his blog, Going Back to School Now What, is a good read.
Do you know John Morrow? Do you know him? I'm just curious.
Yes. Yeah. My wife was on his board, and
we'd love to bring him. We'd love to invite him here for a
second. We should talk to John. John would be incredible.
Yeah.
And because he is that mix. He was a journalist, news reporter on public broadcasting, so he gets it.
No, I have a couple of folks that I'm talking to about coming in. My cousin has built a platform that does for education. So, and he just has a unique view of technology and education that I want to bring in. I have another friend that's a principal that I just think it'd be fun to bring some new folks in to talk about their experience.
John would love it, and he misses being on the air. He would love this group.
Well, let's bring him in. Let's bring him in.
Let me know when you want to do it after the first of the year. I'll talk to him.
January 5th is the next Saturday, I think.
Okay, I'll send him a note.
Yeah, so that would be great. But if not January 5th, January 2nd, or January 9th. Whatever Saturday.
The second may be hard for him, but
the 9th would be great. I mean, any Saturday right now would be great to have him on.
I'll send him a note.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. And I think we're going to close it up for the day. So go ahead. You have one more thing, Emily, before we close it up.
I just had a question. Are you guys doing the after show thing? And then how do I get there? Because I got there one time by a bad link.
Can we post can someone post it into Mukana where the after? I don't have it right in front of me, but if someone can post it into Mukana, okay, great. We'll post it in there. And yes, we are. As soon as we finish this, as soon as I close this up, I'll open it up and we keep on talking. Anyway, so I'm going to close it up, but it's just been great. It's always great. I know we went up and down. This one was a lot. There was clouds, there was rain, there was lightning, and there was some sun. So anyway, I think we covered a lot of ground here today. And so anyway, it's just such a pleasure to talk to all of you about this every day or every week. So thank you for coming on Saturdays and hanging out and having the conversation. So thank you, and we will see you